So thanks everyone for coming. My name's Jason. I've got a gallery up the road here. I've got a show called Outside the Box where I interview some wonderful people. I've had Graham Downing on the show and other people, Ian Crane. And my whole thing is that we're in a new time now as humanity. And I'm glad to see so many people here. The way I put it across in my book, which is called The Emergency Transformation of Human Beings, I spoke of a new epoch. And the word epoch comes from the Greek word epoche, which means stoppage. And I'm absolutely convinced at the moment that we are in a new epoch where the analogy I give is like a pregnancy. When a pregnancy stops and a birth begins, there's a stoppage time where something takes place, and there's no doubt now that we're in a different time as humanity. And I'm not here to browbeat anyone, but I just want to tell everyone here right now, and you know this anyway, everyone in this room, and we're the midwives of the future. We're the people that change things. Everyone on the planet now, we've got a huge responsibility because we change the future. We are the magicians. And what we do right here on this planet now is going to make a difference to those people who haven't even been born yet. It's a really serious issue. And that's what we're going to see here tonight, that this 5G grid, once it goes around the world, we'll have proof here this evening from doctors that it's not only going to fry consciousness, it's going to fry the molecules of your body and your DNA. It's very, very serious. Very, very serious. I've looked into it and I'm very, very worried about it. So, again, thank you for coming and listening. It's a big, big thing. This is Dr. Graham Downing. This man's doing tremendous work to help people, I mean it. Thank you so much. We need more Graham Downings. Thank you, Graham, for coming. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for waiting. I had about a 6-hour drive after clinic this morning, so that was interesting. And got soaked going in to get a quick bite to eat. But I'm here, and we've had loads of stuff, AV stuff, go wrong, but who cares, eh? Because it's the message that counts. A lot's happened in 125 years since we had Tesla at the World's Fair, demonstrating the first AC power system. We've gone through a whole series of developments all the way through to Edison and to Marconi, into 1920s, the first commercial radio station. And we've also gone all the way up from 1947, we had the first microwave phone relay, all the way through to cellular communications, those big phones, remember those big phones in the 80s? All the way through to today. Now, interestingly enough, in the States, the EPA, which was measuring all this stuff, they stopped measuring EMF over the country of the States in 1979, but already, as you can see there from the very last point, the first mile above the Earth is now filled with 2 million times the amount of EMF that we faced in 1900. Okay, so this is not a little problem. Now, for about 4 billion years, the energies that surrounded life are very simple. We've got something called a Schumann resonance. Anyone heard of the Schumann resonance? Kind of goes around the Earth, and it's important in many ways. I'm going to show you maybe some of those as we go along. And it's modulated by atmosphere, by electricity, and by other things. And there was distant radio signals from distant stars, but that's obviously changed. Now, the standards today, if you can read at the bottom there, are based on thermal effects, heat effects on the skin. Now, that's rubbish, because the effects that are causing the problems that we're discussing today are not caused by those. They're caused by biological effects, by the EMF. And I'll start going through them. Now, what alerted me to this is I read the literature. And as Ian will tell you, I'm no activist. I'm not about to try and bring the government down, for crying out loud. I'm just a normal person who works in the clinic with patients. And I read the literature. When professors say this, the new 5G wireless technology involves millimeter waves, which are extremely high frequencies, producing photons of much greater energy that we've already heard about than 4G. And allowing this technology to be used without providing its safety is reckless in the extreme, as the millimeter waves are known to have a profound effect on all parts of the human body. You kind of have to stop in your tracks and listen to someone like that. And as you heard from that guy who was Tom, what's the last guy's name? Yeah, Tom Wheeler. That's just incredible. Did you hear what he said? Excuse my French, screw the testing, we're just going to do this. Okay, now that's a red flag straight away. And this is another example of what was just shown before. They did studies with this. It was actually a very good study. It was controlled, and they controlled for heat. And if you put Wi-Fi 2 inches away from a kind of watercress, if you like, garden cress growing, compared to one that's even a bit further away, they're still using Wi-Fi, just further away. You can see the difference. This is an anti-life technology. There is absolutely no doubt about it. I haven't got time to get into this, but also many components of the atmosphere absorb this. Okay, it affects it. And this is a huge experiment, because you're about to globally go around this world, and you're about to bombard it with this technology. And God knows what it's going to do for the atmosphere, and people are speculating about that. Also, very, very quickly, once again, don't have to read the detail. The point is, it's there to show this is actual real literature. They've shown effects that, yes, it's not just on the surface, it actually gets past the blood-brain barrier and causes problems deep into the brain. And as you heard, sadly, last speaker, his mother passed from a tumour. This is so common. And I knew about this probably 30 years ago. I was listening to experts talking about 30 years ago, or maybe even longer, and they were warning about this. Another paper, very interesting paper. I'm not going to read all of it, but what it's telling you, sadly, it's telling you what you just heard, is a reported higher risk of intracranial tumour for mobile phone use over 10 years. Anybody used a mobile phone over 10 years? Anyone been near mobile phones? That's all of us, over 10 years. Those kind of cordless ones in the house that the nans have, yeah, they are more lethal. They are very, very dangerous. Other studies showing that when it says an odds ratio of 2.2 for glioma, that means it's twice the chance of getting this particular tumour, and on and on and on. And increased risk of brain tumour using cordless phones. And what they find is, they say ipsilateral. It's the side you use it on. That's where you get the tumour. This guy, you may have heard of Martin Powell. He's a professor emeritus. In other words, he's retired. And you find that these guys tell the truth when they retire. And he's saying, well, I've got an idea. I think that the reason why we're having these biological effects, not thermal, is because it's something to do with VGCC. These are particular channels in the cells. In other words, these channels are being activated by this EMF. These channels are everywhere in all your cells. Okay? And also it affects oxidative and nitrosative stress. This is very important, because we now know that these are components of actually control mechanisms inside the cell. So what he's really saying is that this stuff affects how your cells work. And very, very simple there, it says providing strong evidence that these fields can produce an almost instantaneous activation of these cells. So that's the hypothesis. Well, it's backed up by actual field work as well. Unfortunately, they do experiments with animals. It's not very nice, but they do them. And they did studies here looking at all various things with animals, different doses, different frequencies, all the rest of it, different times of dose. And they showed long-term memory was reduced in these test animals. So is anybody seeing an explosion of neurodegenerative problems, Alzheimer's, and all sorts of stuff? Anyone noticing that? Okay, there's many, many reasons for that, and this may well be one of the reasons. But remember, it's safe, because over here, look, it's only to do with anything that bombards the skin, because if you go over 10 gigahertz, apparently, it's not a problem, because it's just going to bounce off you. Okay? Well, you've heard some evidence from other speakers. Here's 11 research groups reporting that between 40 and 130 gigahertz, you get damage to neuronal activity. When it says in vivo, it means live. Okay, just using modest levels of millimeter wave exposure. Okay, so if anyone says to you it doesn't cause any damage and there's no studies, that's complete nonsense, because there's 11 separate research groups reporting nerve damage from this radiation. Once again, showing that it goes into the brain, into the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is areas to do with memory, to do with, sadly, when children are abused, these areas can be damaged, and to how you form memory as well. And that animal's head didn't have the phone or the source right near its ear. It had it 40 centimeters away. And who knows, when you have a phone, we should not be using these damn things anyway, but when you do, you should have it off your ear. Does everyone know that? You should never have it on your ear. And they're showing with this technology here, even when it's 40 centimeters away, it's causing damage. This is how no disrespect to this woman, hopefully you can hear.
What if you could see Wi-Fi signals? It sure would make it easier to figure out where to go to check your email for free. I'm Jen Markham on Buzz 60. artist Nikolai Lamb, known for his photo manipulations, created a series of images of Washington, D.C. landmarks illustrating Wi-Fi signals as different colors. Using data from a Wi-Fi coverage map on the city's website, Lamb depicted how the energy from a Wi-Fi signal travels in waves with different channels, emits the source in a sphere. He also showed how the data travels from routers on multiple signals or colors at the same time, and how trees and buildings can disrupt the signal. Lamb used color to show the individual channels that make up an overall Wi-Fi signal. It'd be so cool if this was a real thing. Can you imagine all the color exploding in dense urban areas? Now all we need is for the passwords to be visible too. Buzz 60. Now you know, pass it on.
Okay, so now you know, pass it on. I'm not going to be disrespectful to that lady, but Jesus, you know. This is an app called The Architecture of Radio. Anyone heard about this app? You can go and download it using this horrible technology. But this is a little, all right, it's graphical kind of representation. This is a bit more real. You put it on your computer or on your iPad, and you can look around. It gives you a representation of what's going on around you. Once again, it's graphical, but who wants to live amongst this? And this is now. We haven't even got into the 5G. You want to bring your kids up in this stuff? Bearing in mind what I've only just started this talk, and bearing in mind the amount of damage I've just told you it does to you. You hear the kids in the background? Okay, download that and have a look and amaze yourself what's around you, maybe even in this room. Einstein, who's a clever chap, says that you can't demodulate these waves. It means they just last forever. Some of them get trapped in our atmosphere, and we just keep filling up our atmosphere with this stuff. There's things called biological entities, okay? And to cut a long story short, they're going too far. They come from outer space, and they found a whole bunch of these on one of the space stations while they were cleaning the windows. And they turned around and said, well, that's a bit interesting. How did they get up here? They must be very tough. That's not a bacterial entity. That's called a tardigrade, just to show you that there are these things that can survive. This thing can survive unbelievable heat and pressure. So these bacteria and things like that are tough. Anyway, long story short, British scientists looked into it and said they're not coming from Earth, they're coming from space. And there's 3 of them there. And there's about 0.1 tons of this stuff falling every day. Did you know that? These kind of space bugs coming down. NASA did research on this, and basically in space they become very tough. And in a sense, they're resistant to treatment. Who thinks it's good to have bacteria and bugs that are resistant to antibiotics and treatment? And I'm leading into this because what they found is, I'm not going to go read everything out, what they found is that this millimeter wave, microwave, it can cause antibiotic resistance. There's arguments either side. But we are hanging on by our fingernails at the moment with antibiotic treatment of disease. Okay? There's about 50,000 people a year in the States, I think, and the equivalent over here that are dying every year because we haven't got antibiotics for them. So is it a good idea to bombard the whole of this planet with this stuff if it has that effect on bacteria and space bacteria that's coming in? You all know this stuff. They've shown that it causes necrosis in leaves. They've done studies with wheat shoots that it causes damage to the wheat shoot, how it grows. And there's also damage with birds and with bees. You've all heard this stuff, so I don't need to go over it again. And also, even the human sweat ducts are going to be affected by this technology. And they hypothesize it's going to cause pain. And in fact, some of these devices are actually used to do that, if you've ever seen them. Who has seen this? Has anyone put their hands up if they've seen this? This was released by Muckrock, which is a kind of online magazine, and they gave a Freedom of Information request to one of the American fusion centers, which is a government center to do with security and terrorism. And they were sent, they put in a basic freedom request about something, reasonably innocuous, and they were sent by mistake documentation. And the documentation showed how towers and this technology was going to be used to control the population. Now, I very rarely will put stuff up like this unless I've got an official source. And this was official. He went all through the details of how you affect the human body, even to the point of putting voices in the head. Okay. Now, I've seen a demonstration of that done with music, which it can do. Now, this is just, I'm not going to go off on a tangent about that. They knew about that since in 1974, for crying out loud. So do you really want this stuff bombarding you? I don't think so. They're also talking about using this kinds of technology to monitor for disease with permanent crowd monitoring. They're also talking about the Gavi organisation, which is Mr. Gates. Anyone know about Bill Gates? Okay. Talking about how they want these technologies so they can monitor kids in Africa to make sure that they've been vaccinated. You may believe in vaccination, I don't know, but I don't think you should be monitoring people with this technology. Also, ID 2020 is coming in, sponsored by the usual culprits, and effectively they're using this to give everybody an ID. That's what they want to do globally by 2020. I think they're a little bit behind. And they want to be able to monitor you from the cradle to the grave. And they want to make sure that you're doing everything they want you to do. So if they want you to take a drug, you will be monitored for it and measured. This is what this technology is really being ramped up for. This is the video. Maybe I won't play this.
It lights up really nice.
Maybe I'll play you this one. Okay.
This is one woman's experience of living on the top floor under cell antennas for 2 months.
It started with my daughter. She initially got a rash on her leg that was sort of unexplainable, and when she was trying to explain to me what it felt like, she kept saying it was kind of funny because it wasn't hurting inside or on the skin. She said it was hurting in the skin. And then a few days later she got another rash on her arm, and then another small kind of stranger rash, and it was the same thing. And then one day in the kitchen she was holding something and she dropped it because she said it felt like the blood in her hand went cold and in a wave along her hand to her fingertips, and then her hand stayed numb for about 15 minutes. Some more of the symptoms include a sort of hissing in my ear, in particular when I'm in my apartment, but for about 3 days, anywhere I went, it would just sort of come in. I kind of felt like an antenna, and I'd sort of kind of go like, trying to find the place where the hissing or the buzzing stopped. I've not slept in my apartment since last Saturday, so a week ago now, and the buzzing went away after about 3 days, and also the feeling of tingling all over my body slowly started to go away. But I have noticed that whenever I'm in other buildings now or anywhere close to, I don't even know what, because I was never sensitive before. I'm no Luddite. I have computers, I have all the stuff that most of us have, and I've never been sensitive at all. But now wherever I go, I'm feeling the same as I felt in my apartment, feeling dizzy and nauseous and a sort of a metallic taste in my mouth, headache and pressure on my head, and just feeling like I want to sort of faint or throw up. And that's wherever I go now. So I found myself becoming increasingly sensitive to my own computer and my own cell phone in ways that I never was before.
Anybody getting those symptoms? Okay. There's various papers out that talk about this. May be one of the reasons. It's to do with how, and this is actually saying it's nothing to do with heat. It's how to do with water is bound on cells that may be affected by this technology. Loads of reviews. This is a normal brain MRI will not show someone who's sensitive to this, but they've actually published a study. And they found an abnormality described as a hyperconnectivity of different parts of the brain with people that are sensitive to Wi-Fi. And interestingly, it's also the differential diagnosis, which you could also say might be linked, is someone who may have had a head trauma or who is susceptible to yeast or yeast infection. Those people seem to, in this study, there seems to be a link between those and people who are sensitive to Wi-Fi. And yeast infections are massively prevalent. Does anyone use Facebook? Anyone use social media? Okay. Those bloody things that go off, bing, bong, bang, every 5 minutes, where it drives you absolutely nuts when a text comes in and all the rest of it. They found that checking your Facebook, checking or your Instagram, when something goes off, is linked to part of your brain shrinking. Did you know that? It's called the nucleus accumbens, shrinking. Now, I said this before, they don't know if it's the fact that it causes it to shrink, or people with that small part of the brain are the people that like using the Facebook. We don't know, but I suspect it's the former. It's regarding the reward center. This thing is linked in with things, also Instagram, it's linked in with things like addiction and other things as well. Now, isn't it interesting that when you undergo a traumatic brain injury, that same part of the brain shrinks? And as I've said countless times, you've ever heard me speak before, if you've got children, for crying out loud, do not let them go on this stuff. And if you're going to use it, be absolutely judicious. You've got to be very discreet in how you use this stuff. Do not buy it on all day. That's my advice to you. Also, what this does is it creates apathy. Okay? And I could talk all day long on the implications of that. And the studies are there. So if you're on this, if you're constantly looking at your bloody phone and this thing's going off all day and you're bing and bang a text, then you need to understand that there's going to be a reckoning to that. Okay, so about 2 billion years ago, the forerunner of your cells were born. Each one of your cells was born by 2 bacteria. They kind of got together and had a little marriage. And one of the bacteria could survive in very low oxygen, the other in very high oxygen. And this becomes important when we talk about 5G. And they've worked this out because they looked at the DNA. These things here, they're mitochondria. That's the descendant of one bacteria. And the rest of the cell is descendant of the other bacteria. They kind of formed a nice marriage, and it survived over the millions of years of our evolution. Now, why is that important? Because we used to think that the DNA ran the cell. Everyone kind of heard that. Now we think that this little bugger here has actually got a lot more to do with it. And it uses reactive oxygen intermediaries, and it also uses probably low electromagnetic fields itself to communicate and help run this cell. Well, there's a problem there, because these little things produce energy, okay? And they produce most of the energy in your body. In actual fact, they produce over 90% of the energy. And at any one point in time, you have to produce every day your own body weight of molecules of energy that are made in these little factories. And you probably only got about 5 seconds storage at any one point in time. Now, if you don't get that energy, you're very seriously unwell and probably will die. And things like cancer and chronic fatigue are linked to that. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but they're made, these are enzymes in these little factories that make this energy. Now, there's various debates, I'm just going to go quickly through this, about how it's done. You don't need to know about that. But the point is this: what you don't want to do is you don't want to damage them, because if you damage them, you're going to get things like cancer, or you're going to die, okay? Because suddenly, your ability to make loads of energy stops, and you start making very low amounts of energy. So microwave, millimeter wave technology damages the mitochondria in a time response, dose response way. That's a classic way of proving that something causes harm. Okay, so already we have evidence that it does that. And it damages 2 particular key enzymes. One's called succinate dehydrogenase, and the other's called cytochrome C oxidase. Now, this is science. This is not someone with a tinfoil hat talking crap. Excuse my French. This is absolutely science, okay? Now, there's a human resonance again, and we've talked about that. Now, does anyone meditate here? Well, the frequencies of the human resonance are often quoted very, very similar to the same frequencies in the brain when you meditate, and there's actually studies on it, and I've pulled one up there. And therefore, do you really want to be mucking around with these frequencies? And also, we found out, because you've got different frequencies in your brain, that you need to be healthy and to be alive, and we absolutely know that these mitochondria are also involved in doing that as well. So if you damage these, you damage your ability to be healthy in your brain, and also, for those that are interested, will be damaging in meditation at all. Now, the way to look at it is, see this thing here, this is kind of a diagram of a cell, if you like. You kind of got the center part of the DNA, you've got these little mitochondria floating around in a kind of cytoplasm, if you like. And if you imagine, if you imagine these are whales around the oceans. Now, they, for how many years, they lived quite happily, and then shipping came along, and noise came along, and it destroyed their communication. Well, in essence, these mitochondria are communicating. There are 1,000 of them in each cell, and they're communicating and helping to run the cell and keep you alive. If you're going to bombard that with millimeter wave technology, you're absolutely going to disrupt that. And what we've done is I've just shown you through papers, and also by example, how that's going to happen. So this is the reason why we're very, 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 very worried about this, because the key thing in your cell that keeps you alive is going to be affected by this technology. And that's the question you've got to ask. And it's taken 2 billion years to develop this in us. Is 5G about to destroy 2 billion years of evolution? And that's the question I'm asking, and I'd like an answer. I think it's a very reasonable request. Can we have an answer on this, please? Because without this stuff working, we're dead. Why are they doing this? Why are they bringing, whoever they are, why are they bringing 5G in? Okay, did you hear him? The head guy said, oh, the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things, where everything's going to be labelled. We're all going to be, I don't want to be labelled. I don't want to be wearing stuff that's got chips all over the place. Thank you very much. Now, look at this headline. Will help us predict the future. The actual talk I was going to give was going to go from this point on, okay, which is probably a little bit too much for today. But I'll just give you a little teaser here. Has anybody heard of the Sentient World simulation? Okay, published about 2000, maybe 7, 8, 9. This gives you an idea of why they need this information. The Sentinel World Simulation Project, the ultimate goal envisaged by this gentleman, a continuously running, continuously updated mirror model of the real world that can be used to predict and evaluate future events and courses of action. And it goes on to talk about that in detail. I don't have enough time to get into that. Military are already doing it. This was a particular project they did called MNE4. They used data from various countries in Europe and America. And what they did, they used it as an exercise to see how they could influence another country to do what they wanted them to do, okay? These things are up and running at all sorts of levels, commercially and militarily. But they need information, they need data, and they need 5G to bring this about, okay? So 5G isn't just about it's going to give you cancer and it's very dangerous. There's a whole other aspect to this. Who understands that AI is a massive threat to your jobs? Okay? These are serious studies from serious academic schools, all predicted, probably the next 10 years, 12 years, probably about half of you are going to lose your job to AI technology. Okay, and in some countries up to 60 to 80%. They need 5G to bring this technology on board. There are various people involved in this. I'm going to take you down a tangent. This is a guy, he's a professor, very well respected. He's the head of something called the Basic Income Earth Network, because if you're going to lose your job, you need to be paid, so you need a basic income. It sounds sounds great. So they're all pushing this. In fact, it's been pushed globally. He's also interested in linguistic justice. Now, what linguistic justice means, if you're English speaking, you need to pay a tax to someone who doesn't speak English, because they need to speak English in order to get on in the world. This is the kind of thinking of these people, okay? You're dealing with some very interesting characters. Other professors are involved in this, talking about we need this kind of stuff. Basic income, the pilots are everywhere in the world because they know you are going to lose your job, so they're going to have to give you a basic income. The problem is you become poorer on basic income. Also, I want to ask you a question. When the government says to you, I'm going to give you money, do you think that's going to be the end of it? Do you think you might be told where you can live and what you can do? Okay, and this is what you need to start thinking. There's a social side to this technology, and it's very well researched. There's another guy from the Royal Society of Arts, which I've said to Ian before and said on stage, I thought was a benign organisation. I didn't realise they were activists. This guy here, no disrespect to him, but I disagree with him. He obviously went to a conference, and you can read it on the DVD later or whatever, where he was radicalised, because the language they're talking about, how do you decapitate a king? How do you bring down power? This is incredible. This is the Royal Society of Arts. And this guy's the head of the actual project in Scotland at the moment, testing this basic income in this country, or in Britain. And he says now hear this is the language. We now have the opportunity to move the basic income conversation forward and identify practical ways to run a pilot which works locally and has global resonance. That is a globalist language. If you know anything about Agenda 2020 and 2030 and all these sorts of things, basic income can't be another small response. Bear in mind, this is coming on the back of 5G and AI that's going to take your jobs. It should be radical, it should be world-changing, and it should be effective, and it's just a starting point. It's the beginning of a new social contract. So when 5G comes in, AI technology is going to come on board, you're going to lose your job, now you're going to be paid an income by the government, and it's the beginning of a new social contract. And he says we need to start talking about land ownership, and we need to start talking about how you're taxed. And really what this is, in my interpretation, is, anybody's got a different idea, like you may ask Ian later, is that means you won't own land, you won't own a house, and you won't own a car. Okay? This is where they're pushing this. And no one's asked your permission if you want to agree with that or not. Now, they started to push all this with documents many, many years ago. I'm not going to get too much into this. This is all from published literature. And it all came about equality. Everyone's got to be equal. No, I've got no problem with equality. I couldn't give a damn what race, gender you are, as long as you're a decent person. But that was just the beginning. And they knew where they were going to take this, because they're then going to take it to social equity and equity of outcome. Equity of outcome means everybody has to have an equal outcome. Okay, you can't earn more than someone else, you can't have more energy than someone else, you're all going to live in the same size house. There's documents demonstrating this, don't have time to get into it. But so to be fair, you have to have equity, all these things have to be equal, the amount of children you have. If you look at how this ideology, and it is an ideology, has been used before in the history of this planet, that also goes down to what your beliefs are and what you can say. And I think you just said someone was just gagged wanting to speak about certain things. So everything must be monitored. This is the reason why you're having so-called smart technology. the Fitbits, the things that go on you. Everything's got to be on it. You're just being teased with this stuff at the moment. You have to kind of understand where this is going to go. And that means you can't have privacy, okay? Privacy is gone, okay, according to these people, whoever these are, or they are. And isn't it interesting how things are just moving along at the same thing? Suddenly we're watching lots of programs about people being watched. Yeah, we're kind of warmed up to this. Loads of programs about kids being watched, adults being watched, whatever it is. And now and then Amazon Echo comes out, and suddenly, isn't it great? I'm not bothered about having a microphone in my house that's recording everything I say, and is selling it on to third-party people. Can you imagine anyone here who's above a certain age, 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, anyone said, I'm going to put a microphone in your house, and you would have gone, you've got to be crazy. Okay, you talk to younger people today, no disrespect to anyone here that is more informed. Isn't it interesting that the head of Apple was really pushing these cars, this whole kind of car automotive technology, and you've got Uber, share your car. Airbnb, share your house. Isn't it interesting how these ideas are coming in? Autonomy requires privacy, okay? Autonomy requires privacy. And the psychological papers are very clear. You don't have privacy, you've got no autonomy. This way of framing the issue makes sense if you understand privacy solely as political or legal concept, and its political importance is certainly part of what makes privacy so important. What is private is what is yours alone to control, and without interference from others or the state. But the concept of privacy also matters for another deeper reason. It is intimately connected to what it is to be an autonomous person. The connection between loss of privacy and dehumanization is a well-known and ancient fact. You cannot be persuaded to give up your privacy. This technology is part of doing that. Anyone like this guy? He's calling for universal basic income. He thinks he's got a church, and he's the head of it, no doubt. Here's another guy talking from the Basic Income Earth Network, just to show you how this social side is changing. We need to create this new connected culture. Everything's going to be connected. And we need to drive us to compete for social contribution. If you understand your history, you know what he's really talking about. To achieve that, many people will need to undergo training. So you haven't got a job, you go on basic income, and now they're going to train you as educators and community organisers to create and maintain a positive social climate. I recommend that a basic income will not come by itself, rather it will be coupled with socio-educational training. You're talking about 5G, but you're talking about a much bigger thing. China's already on it. I talked about this recently and also a year before. They've got something called who's heard of the social credit system? You're scored, almost like a Facebook liking system. When you say what the government wants you to say, you're given a plus point. When you're not, you're given a negative point. You get enough negative points, you're gone. Once you lose trust, once they lose trust in you, this is how they say it, you're never allowed back in the system. I think at the moment, Ian, I don't know the data on it, but it's between 11 and 13 million Chinese people have been put in the sin bin, which means you don't travel, you're now blocked from travel. This is all, I'm going to tell you here and now, this is a template for what's going to come here, okay, in my opinion, from what I've seen. When we look here at 5G, this is China. China's really pushing this. And also they're pushing this along the Silk Road, they're pushing this in Africa, their technology, and they need 5G to step their system up. They're massively a template now for what's going to go on in the rest of the world. Here's a simple video, but some of you may have seen this.
Well, let's see how long it takes you to find me. Thank you very much. Let's go.
我们可以追溯到说，出现每一张脸都可以对应说他的身份证， 以及它所经过，比方说在过去1周，我们回溯它的行经路程，我们也做了像人和车的匹配。那同时在人上匹配还包括亲属关系匹配，然后是你经常接触人员之间匹配。就是当摄像机布到或者我们传感器布到一定密度的时候，其实我们会经常知道你跟谁经常在一起。
Well, here we are then. I've just got out of the car, close to the city centre, and for the purposes of this exercise, the plan is for me to start walking in the direction of the bus station. My image has already been flagged to the authorities as a suspect, and in theory, it should only be a matter of time. So already on this bridge, I can see 1, 2, 3 CCTV cameras. Of course, there's no point hiding from them. Just keep on walking.
可以呢，不一定非要从门里头通过，他就站在。哎，对，就是这里，就是这里。就是看过。对，就是这里。
Uh-oh. Right behind me, you can see just over my left shoulder there. Hello, guys. I've been expecting you. Maybe these guys aren't in on the joke.
那么对平民老百姓，是老百姓需要帮助的时候，我们才会录入这套系统。那他不需要帮助的这种情况，那么我们是不需要采集他的信息的。那这种信息只是在我们大数据里面有他的信息就行了。那在什么时候使用，是根据我们的需要来做这项工作的。
If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear.
对，是这样。所以说，老百姓应该不用担心。
你觉得为什么它
摄像头？
对，
因为现在民怨沸腾，就是它真正的用来预防犯罪的效果很少，反对的、不同意见的。让我觉得每天你都感觉到有一只眼睛盯着你，一只无心的眼睛，不管你干什么事儿，你总是有所顾忌。高科技为那个警察维稳提供了方便，所以他们的思路如果不改变，对这么一些意见人士，然后进行监控。可能是起了更大的作用。
Would it worry you to know that your every move, your every association was being watched? Does that change something fundamental?
Honestly, I won't feel very comfortable. There's a certain level of discomfort. First, I think technology by itself is a tool for human being, just like a weapon. If it is in the wrong hands, like in a terrorist's hands, it might do very bad things, right? But government do develop weapons. I think there are reasons that technology keep advancing, like artificial intelligence. It can be applied to do a lot of good things.
So who gets a warm, fuzzy feeling? The whole prediction thing as well, that's a whole other talk. This is a professor. We've already created the blueprint for innovative cyborg tissue and recently shown how to mingle this in the brain. They give you an injection into the head, opens a mesh, and that connects your brain up to the internet. It's already up and going, and is being very well tolerated. This guy is one of the leading chemists in the world, so if you think this is conspiracy, you're absolutely wrong. This is what they're doing. They're connecting the brains of animals together, and it's almost formed, and these animals can be thousands of miles apart, and they start to work as one, almost like a biological computer. This is a template for what they want to do with humans. Here's another guy, he's a UK professor. Personal computing will become intrapersonal and intracellular. Each human neuron will be hijacked by a self-growing, self-repairing molecular network. Computers check this out. Computers will be networks of polymer filaments grown inside together with a human. Seeds of the networks will be injected into embryos in the first month of their development, and they will form a gigantic network inside the brain. Computers will be inside us. They will span all living creatures in a united computing network. If that doesn't turn your stomach, you're not a human being. Now, these are scientists. This is where this is going. This is how this is developing. It requires 5G. Okay, it requires 5G. This is a book called The Scientific Conquest of Death, and this is a chapter by a guy called Ray Kurzweil, who's the head of DeepMind for Google. And he says it will be routine practice to have billions of nanobots coursing through the capillaries of your brains, communicating with each other, as well with our biological neurons and with the internet. One application would provide full immersion into virtual reality. And if you didn't understand that, basically he says he's going to plug your brain into the internet by 2030. Now, you need to understand these are the very, very serious players. They require 5G to do this as well. Rolling Stone done an interview on him. It's a very interesting character. I'm going to cut this very, very short. He wants to use this technology to bring his dead father back to life. You have to understand what these people are about. These people are setting the course for your future. Other people have got more common sense. In his book, Our Post-Human Future, because this is what they're talking about. They're taking this technology and going beyond human, post-human, transhuman. Okay, this is where they're pushing all this. He basically says, there's lots of things he says, but effectively, if you've got an elite who are transhuman and you've got normal humans who just want to live their life, you've got a problem. Not everyone can or wants to receive the same level of enhancement. Haven't got time to get into what those enhancements are, but they've got them. For example, having a mesh put in your head, human rights may be threatened. And the same issue of superiority would apply to the question of inequality. Some people might not be able to afford it. And the reality is what he's saying is, if you look to history, you look to nature, what happens when you get a superior species? What does it do to the inferior species? It subjugates it or removes it. And at the highest level, they're talking about the human race being removed by this technology, by AI. This technology is so advanced, it is absolutely frightening. This was the 9th conference. We're on the 11th conference, Beyond Humanism. Okay, this is why they're rolling this 5G out. There's a whole thing behind this. Okay, it's not just simple 5G. Down at the bottom, they're talking about it. What it's also worth noting, this is seriously discussed, is the formation of new cultures and societies which consist of non-human subjects mingling with humans, or forming their own separate and previously unseen world. They're talking about the new AI brains, okay, the new AI things that are coming in. Who's heard of synths? They're building synths now, okay, which is a kind of synthetic human, okay, to be powered and to be embodied with this alleged kind of consciousness, which is from an artificial intelligence. One of the guys, I'm just very going to quickly wrap this up. I don't have time to get into this, but 5G is central to all this. I'm showing you documentation. This isn't conspiracy, okay? This is scientific documentation, whether you're aware of it or not. This is a very, very these people I believe they're insane, but hopefully I'm not the only one on this planet who believes that. I'm going to show you now a clip. I played it before. Some of you may see it. This guy you're going to hear is Geordie Rose or Gordy Rose. He is the developer with a company of quantum computers. Quantum computers are used by NASA. His computers are used by NASA and Google and others to develop the AI technology, the AI thing that's going to be in this new synth bodies, okay, this kind of consciousness. These computers already connect outside of this dimension with 2 to the 500 power dimensions. That's from their white papers and their literature. 2 to the 500 power dimensions they connect. And he's talking about using this intelligence from these dimensions in these machines to bring them to life. Now this is actually for real, this is not a joke, and this is him speaking. Listen very carefully.
I don't know if any of you are turn-of-the-century weird fiction fans, but there's this guy named H.P. Lovecraft, who's a very famous American weird fiction author. And he espoused a view which is called cosmicism. And the essence of cosmicism is cosmic indifference. So what he was saying is basically, yes, there are these massively intelligent entities out there, but they're not good, they're not evil. They just don't give a shit about you even in the slightest. The same way that you don't care about an ant is the same way they're not going to care about you. And these things that we're summoning into the world now are not demons, they're not evil, but they're more like the Lovecraftian great old ones. There are entities that are not necessarily going to be aligned with what we want. So this transition is really, really massively important for our entire species to navigate. And going back to that thing that Sam Harris was saying, nobody is paying attention. This thing is happening in the background while people bicker about politics and what's going to be in the healthcare plan in the US. And underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we're not careful, is going to wipe us all out.
Okay, so 5G is a component of this. This is what you need to understand. That's the leading guy in the world. NASA has his computer. This is not a raving lunatic down the pub talking to you. Now, there's a lot more to talk on that. I haven't got time. But you need to understand something. 5G is one of the final nails in the coffin before AI comes in. And when AI comes in, people have heard me say this before. Yes, there are good aspects of it, but the reality is I've looked at this in great detail, far more than I can go into today, and I do not see the human race surviving this down the line. I really do not, okay? And I'm sorry to put a downer on a Saturday night and tell you that, but you do need to understand, and I urge you to research and look at this for yourself. I'm quite happy to take questions afterwards. I think you're going to hear from Mark. This has gone a little bit longer than I planned. Anyway, thank you for listening to me, and hopefully it was worth coming down today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for helping. That mark's on there. Can you show that for me? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Dr. Graham Downing. Great respect for your great work, helping people understand everything, and also helping people who are ill. This man's doing a clinic every day, an amazing human being. Thank you so very much for dedicating your life to helping people, you know. It's just a tiny short segment now with Mark Steele, who I recorded this with Mark Steele. Mark's an amazing warrior. He's in Newcastle, I think, isn't he, Graham?
Something like that, yeah, Gateshead.
Eh?
Gateshead.
Sorry, Gateshead, yeah. An amazing man who's dedicated his life to this. You know, he's getting in big trouble with police and everything. But the way this man says it on here, Mark, it's astounding. It really, really is, and it's very, very important. Thank you, Graham.
Thanks very much, Mark. Mark Steele's joining us. Mark is a Chief Technology Officer and a patent writer and inventor. Mark is here. Thank you, Mark, for joining us at the Civic Hall in Totnes to enlighten us about the terrible, terrible dangers of 5G. The more I look into it, the more terrified I am. Thank you for coming to help us understand it with your expertise tonight, Mark. Thank you so much from all of us.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks for everybody for coming tonight. This is a pretty unbelievable story. But what the information I'm going to impart tonight, it is unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. But what I'm going to suggest to everybody, do your own research. I'm going to point you in a few directions, but do your own research. This is unbelievable, and everyone needs to sort of understand it in a little bit more depth than what we are currently being told by the mainstream media. First and foremost, 5G is unlawful. The designs of the antennas are unlawful, they're illegal. It's a paradigm shift in product development. And what I'm saying by that, every product that comes to the market, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's paper clips, tires on your vehicle, your engine, all undergo a number of regulatory body standards. These technologies haven't got any. The reason why they haven't got any is they wouldn't pass any. They're actually ignoring all the current standards, all the guidelines. They're not risk assessed, and they are absolutely uninsurable. This is smart. Anything that's smart is not smart. Very bad idea. When I get to the end of this talk, you'll be going home and having a really good think about it. So they're uninsurable. In its battlefield interrogation equipment, mainly, that is ending up on the in the cityscape near you, and it's comes in all different guises. The believers, it's not very good. I know there'll be a lot of people who've noticed disappearance over the last few years of small pollinators. The mainstream media blame pesticides, nicotinides. It's an easy target. We're not saying it's not a cause, but it most certainly isn't what's causing the collapse in ladybirds, butterflies, moths, etc. they're being annihilated by LED street lighting, transmitters, and microwave radiation, and we can show that. And this is an existential threat to all of us, to our food stock, agriculture, and to the economy. These few images here show that the mainstream media have picked up on the issue. However, what they're not telling you is what the real cause is. In the article from India, it shows that the microwave pollution, they have actually noticed. So you've got a country in India where they have noticed what's causing the collapse in the ecology, right? But for whatever unbelievable reason, the reckless environmental crime goes on in this country unabated. And this isn't from 5G. This is from 3 to 4G technology. Secret council contracts. Sheffield Council have refused an FOI from the South Yorkshire Post, because what they really don't want people to find out why they're chopping all the trees down in Sheffield. The reason why is 5G, the future of 5G. 5G high frequency compressed signal systems, these are the higher data rates, do not travel through trees. They don't, most certainly don't when they're wet. So the trees have to come out. Surrey University have shown that for to do 5G correctly, to get 100% 5G, you need 100% of your trees to be removed. The Victorians planted these trees for a reason. It's beneficial for the environment. It captures CO2, and most certainly their removal is a humanitarian crime, because the toxicity levels in cities will increase and people will become ill. So we all want to live in a toxic-free environment. This is some of the other attributes of trees, fixed night rates, etc. We need trees, but councils are cutting them down in secret and covert operations with telecoms companies, and very many of the world's leading scientists, specialists in their field, are calling for a moratorium on 5G. And the reason is because of the catastrophic increase in illness that is now being and emerging from the 3 and 4G, 2G and 1G telecoms. And why wouldn't it? It's microwave radiation. And the more you have of it, the more deleterious effect it will have on the population and the environment. And smaller bodies, children, small insects, they are the first. They are the biggest target, because the body density is, and it has a great effect in reducing your exposure level. Like any type of radiation, the larger you are, the more you're protected. This is where it comes from. Phased array high gain antennas. The first one there on the left-hand side, Mammoth. It was a phased array. It had a 200-mile radius. It was used during the war. So you can see this technology has been around for a long time. And the reason why the GPU have put a lot of posts up around the country at great expense and put those signals into a cable, because they knew they weren't safe. This Mammoth posed a significant risk to Allied aircraft. Not only could it make them sick, it actually directed, fighter aircraft, searchlights, and ground weapon systems to them. Now, the picture on the right, on the middle there, is a very sophisticated phased array antenna. The more of those antenna, the more focus you have, and the further you can punch your signal, the more you can see. And that's a phased array signal there on the right-hand side. Now, these are obviously battlefield pieces of equipment. And it's one of the reasons why these side lobes, you see these little blue things on the right-hand side at the bottom, this is one of the reasons, and it's one of the reasons why these troops are coming back suffering PTSD. They've actually got brain injuries from it. That's how powerful this stuff is, not what we are being misinformed about. And this is them on the battlefield. That's one there. Looks as if it's shooting something out the sky. That's it in real deployment on a ship in the right-hand larger image. And that's it on the front of these planes. They're basically for battlefield interrogation, but most certainly have a other use, let's say. And if anybody wants to look at Secret History of Silicon Valley, Brundtland weapons, and they revolutionized the battlefield. And it's one of the reasons why autonomous vehicles are now required, because the toxicity levels on the battlefield are getting so great that you can't deploy men there. And I know that because obviously some of my inventions are there to mitigate battlefield interrogation equipment like this in the head-up display systems inventions, and it's how I know all about these particular types of weapon systems. Here's a very up-to-date piece of information. That same battlefield interrogation equipment and the frequencies that are being currently rolled out for your 5G across the country, masquerading as control management systems on light posts, class 1 cancer-causing radiation. This is an Israeli study on the occupational military guys who have been deployed in the field, and they are developing cancer from it. And here it is. Doesn't look much, does it? Small little antenna there. Well, that antenna is a 25 milliwatt transmitter. The maximum I can expose a human to, a 200-pound one, by the way, that's 14 stone, not a small one. It's one. The manufacturer says one safe at several meters. You can see these right next to dwellings where people live. Their lives will be absolutely torturous. It's been rolled out without any regard to human health. The manufacturer says one safe at 7 meters. We have 31,875, and each one has what the manufacturer says 5-kilometer footprint poppycock in its phased array antenna, because they can actually operate as a phased array. It's significantly more punchy than that. So that's not really true. And what we've seen, these 25 milliwatt transmitters attached to, it's common sense really. Those two birds on the left-hand side will die. These couple of doves here, nobody's warning them. In fact, it's a nice little a little roost there for them, because it'll be nice and warm, I can tell you. That will kill them. It's a reckless wildlife crime. The LED streetlights have recently been shown, this is not the transmitter, by the way, just the LED streetlight has been shown to double cancer risks. That optical radiation's only been about for a very small period of time. We've already seen a doubling, and I can tell you those LED streetlights that pulse modulated at 450 nanometers, extremely hazardous to cellular retinal cells. We see toxicity from that. And we know that LED streetlights attract pollinators. Well, we don't have any. So now this is your 5G neural network. These you can find them on the internet. You see the phased array in the left-hand side picture here. That's radar. So that phased array radar scanning your home. That's what that does. It scans through your home. It's in breach of your human rights. Government, central government, are determined to roll out 400,000 across the whole of the country. And believe us, it'll wipe out every single pollinator. So everybody in the countryside are going to get MIMO tanks, but you're not going to see any pollinators, and your crops are going to fail, and your animals are going to be sterilized, because that's what this stuff does. It has a 3D mapping capability. The picture on the right-hand side basically shows people being, what did they say, served up. Quite an interesting comment, but that's most certainly what 5G phased array cells will do to humans. You get in between that signal and your device, you will be in trouble. People think, oh, that sounds a bit strange, but here's the proof. It's actually been tested in South Korea on wild boar. Now, anybody that knows anything about porcine tests, where you use munitions to fire at pigs, it's basically so you can understand what the collateral damage and the damage to that particular animal is going to be. Because they're very much like humans when you cut them up. It's just pretty interesting that they're going to shoot these same rays at wild boar. And believe us, it'll not just be like noises that they hear, they will die. And you want to know what it's for? This is it. This is the picture. This is a 3D mapping capability from your phased array antenna. It strips away everything and you can see into your home. We're pretty sure it's a class 1 cancer-causing radiation, and this is for the future RFID tags that are coming in 2020. So every barcodes are going to be replaced. most of your packaging. And this is so your council and your local authorities can monitor your bins. They can see what you're putting away. In their plan, everybody goes, well, why would they want to do something as outrageous as that? Well, I can tell you, they've been told they're going to sell you the data. So they know when you've used the product, the advert pops up on your smart device and they sell that information to the highest bidder. It's all illegal. It's a breach of human rights. And if you go and have a look at any of the demonstrations that's done by any of these telecoms, smart city, you'll see exactly what it's about. Here's the information on the RFID tags, billions of them. And the billions of those RFID tags, they increase the toxicity because they're basically just a printed mirror. That mirror's in your home. It has to be charged, energized to send a signal back to the tank, to this MIMO tank, or from the transmitter outside your home. So it's actually got to be energized, and it produces a lot of radiation in your home. So the current toxicity levels will increase, unbelievably. And here you go. Let's get to the punchline. The 5G smart agenda narrative rolling across cities, countryside. Well, you know what it stands for? Secret militarized arms and residential technologies. That's where it came from. Smart meters, smart cities, critical infrastructure risks, and a temperature rise, and plus charging air. So we see people there, lawsuit against P&G for smart meters, for causing house fires. 5,000 utility companies where the energy companies look as if they've been a bit naughty there and just increased their bills without anybody actually knowing. So whole thing's a total nightmare. We've got telecoms companies turning cities into toxic microwave radiation ovens where we will die. No two ways about it. This is what positively charged air can cause. So it causes oxidative stress, leads to cancer, damages the immune system, in this full list here of the potential harm from positive charged air. This is what we got in 2017. They're in total denial, by the way, and I've recently just been gagged, so I can't talk about this at all. For some inexplicable reason, I think they've said in my near locality that people are starting to believe something that I've been telling them for a while. The WHO know non-ionizing radiation, right? And the reason why they classified as a 2B was because of the increased risk from glioma. This is at non-thermal levels of radiation where people were increasing the brain cancer, all right? And that was a 2B, but that was from earlier 2011 work. This is the thermal impact of the same device, the same emitter, but obviously on different head size. Because obviously the issue that we have, Protection Health England said to do a symmetry, thinks this doesn't happen. What they've said is that there's no difference between body size and radiation impact. Now, when did we ever have scientists at a publicly funded body lie? Because that's what that is. In fact, if we knew who it was who actually made this statement, it's miscreants in a public office. Here's some images of bloods before and after. You can see the picture on the left-hand side. I've lifted it from the internet, and what it shows is bloods. They look pretty okay there. And only after a couple of minutes being exposed to smart meters, you can see the detrimental damage. What's really interesting and most shocking is the picture on the right. That's blood stacking. It's called relay. What relay causes is nosebleeds. So if your smart meter hasn't set fire to your home, it hasn't been hacked, it causes this. It's absolutely unbelievable. These are children in my near locality bleeding from the nose. All just started since we had this these transmitters fitted at near close to bedroom windows, in breach of the manufacturer's instruction, in breach of all international regulatory codes and standards. Microwave radiation is a noxious substance. It's a non-thermal neurological impact. This is a very highly cited paper. I suggest everybody watch Martin Powell's videos. He does some lectures on YouTube. Very interesting chap. One of the leading experts in the world. Very brave. And he tells you how dangerous non-thermal microwave radiation is. And the epidemiological data substantiates all of this. 68% increase in children self-harming, women in particular, young girls in particular. Body density. See, if women have got, on average, smaller heads, then they're impacted even more so. So we know this is the case. And what about the poor children? Who was old enough, in the room to know when you went to school? I mean, self-harm. Nobody self-harmed when I was at school. I mean, we had some guys who, weren't in the best of mental health, but self-harming, hadn't heard of it. And the Bristol University heads for a meltdown. It is one of the government's 5G experimental test beds. I'm not surprised. So it causes a significant number of, sort of memory loss. Can you imagine you're a young student at university, and you're studying for something you can't remember what you're researching? That would be pretty difficult. And here's a smoking gun. A 38% increase in stroke in young women in the USA, as opposed to 15%. Now, I know that this microwave radiation has a more deleterious effect on small-bodied living things, and the reason why they've annihilated all the pollinators. But this is appalling. Think of the economic cost. This is the economic terrorism. We know microwave radiation breaks down the blood-brain barrier. We know it does from the science, and obviously from the smaller heads, we see this type of appalling data. Ofcom's proposal on untested unknown risk to biology from higher pulse frequency waves at 60 gigahertz. Well, if anybody knows about 60 gigahertz, it gets stuck in air. It doesn't travel very well in it at all. So it's a bit bizarre that Ofcom are going to give it away, because they sell these parts of the spectrum for quite a lot of money. 60 gigahertz isn't very good. It's been given away. But if I was to blast enough 60 gigahertz amplitude into an oxygen molecule, I might break it. And that oxygen atom will attach with other oxygen molecules and create O3. O3 kills at 50 parts per million. It will kill all biological life. So it's a bit bizarre that Ofcom would even want anyone to use this part of the spectrum, never mind giving it away. And the international humanitarian courts have ruled on this. This is a document that was produced in 2011 on the back of the significant increases in brain cancers in children in particular. So these guys know where it's coming from. We know where it's coming from. It just looks like every other regulatory body in the UK are out to lunch. Basically forgot what they're really here for, and that's to protect the people. This is the lawful resolution that is currently being ignored. We're measuring radiation levels in people's bedrooms as much as 3,000 millivolts. And the Parliamentary Assembly says that 200 is the maximum. The Bioinitiative report scientists, these are the leading experts in the world, they say 20. The court say 200, and we've got near 3,000. We've got 7,000 and 10,000 on streets next to MIMO tanks in where I live. And here's the fix. People think, protest, demonstrate, believers. Millions demonstrate against the Iraq war. Did they get anywhere? No. The system is resistance to protest. It is resistance to everything apart from the ballot box. So, a little bit of protest, but make no mistake about it. Political parties get involved. There's numbers of people there who are members of the party. Talk to them. Set up your own wards. Get involved. Get active. Be the resistance. We are the resistance. Join the resistance. Focus your attention. Obviously, people have lots of other, associations and affiliations. What I can tell you, the RSPB out to lunch, Greenpeace out to lunch, all of the charities we spoke to, Friends of the Earth, you name it, everyone, they are ignoring our protestations. Rang them, spoke to them. Government ministers, not listening. Everybody, I don't know what's happened, but change tack. We have to fight this ourselves. Nobody else is going to come to help. The police aren't going to come to help. I had police officers at my home about some of those images of children. I give them all the evidence, still haven't acted. This is assault. Our people are being assaulted. Our country is under attack. We have to make enough noise. And it is through focused attention, very much like the weapon systems that I know a lot about. It is through that focused attention how we will win this. This is not a battle we can lose. We have to win. So our collective efforts, and we will prevail. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. Most certainly do your own research. You know, look around you, talk to people, talk, tell, text. Do not use social media over and above its initial impact. It is your adversary's battle space, and believe you me, you'll never win a war on Facebook. Take it to the streets, talk to people in shops, cafes, bars, coffee shops in particular, barber shops, hairdresser shops. Speak to your community. Get involved. Let's get this madness stopped. This is criminal. It will hurt you. It will hurt your family. It will kill your pets. We have to stop.
Save us now. Mark, Steele, thank you very much for joining us tonight and helping us understand the monster that we face. It's a Godzilla and we have to absolutely stop it before it fries us all. Consciousness and molecular structure. We've got a great guest up next. His name's John Kitson from Totnes. John's one of the most brave people that actually went down to the school when they were putting the mast up, when the demonstration was there. And John was there handing out leaflets. John's broken his back for this event and done so much to advertise. And John's an amazing, amazing warrior for truth. And he's telling the truth, which you'll see now. And I thank you very much, John, for your great courage for doing what you're doing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, buddy. Thank you so much, Jason. I couldn't have done this without Jason. So it wouldn't have happened really at all. I met Jason end of last year and read his really great book, The Emergency Transformation of Humanity. And he's just up the road there in the art shop, and I was popping in and say hi. So thank you for helping me set this up, Jason. So today we're going to talk about smart meters and 5G for my presentation. I left Tokyo in November. I had a smart meter installed outside my apartment. I moved, I had a smart meter installed again. No consultation. They didn't say, do you want a smart meter? The guy just came and installed one. And in Japan, they don't ask you if you want one. They just whack one on your apartment. Lovely. So there's no consultation, even if you're the landowner. They have a goal. They have to have everything smart, everything hooked up. So I thought, okay. In the UK, I heard that about half of people are refusing one. So I thought we've all got a chance here. So we're going to start off smart meters. What is a smart meter? Smart meters are the new generation of gas and electricity meters. So this is from Smart Energy GB. They are being installed in homes across Great Britain at no extra cost to replace the traditional meters, including prepaid key meters. Most of us currently have ticking away under the stairs or outside our homes. What do smart meters do? A smart meter sends automatic meter readings directly and securely to your energy supplier, resulting in accurate bills and enter estimates and manual meter readings. The accompanying in-home display is a handheld digital device that sits in your home and allows you to see how much energy you're using and what it's costing you in pounds and pence in near real time. This may be called lots of things like IHD, in-home display, or smart meter display. Both your smart meter and in-home display will be installed by your energy supplier at no extra cost. Wow, I'm so excited. So this is Ecotricity. Who's heard of them? They're pushing the smart meters. They're supposed to be a green, clean company, aren't they? So, they can help you here. Smart meter hotlines, smart meter pay as you go. So they're saying As part of government plans to bring our energy system up to date, around 53 million smart meters will be fitted in over 26 million homes. Wow, so that's 2 smart meters a home. That's, don't really fancy that. It's a great move. Smart meters are 21st century energy meters and will mean better control of your energy, more accurate bills, and better ways to save money. We'll be rolling out smart meters to Ecotricity customers from 2016. We'll get in touch with you when installments are about to start in your area. So, yeah, lots of cute pictures there, trying to encourage people into the smart meters. Now, I have come across some people. I came across someone in Totnes, I'm not going to name names, but there are people encouraging other people to change their meter, and some smart meter companies are offering commissions if you can get someone to change to a new meter. But then if you end up with a smart meter, is that what you really want? Well, let's find out at the end of this presentation. So you've got a little video here giving an alternative view on the smart meters. This was requested by a number of people, so I thought I'd have to include this one. Okay.
It's Smart Attack.
Hey, Sally, looks like you could use some help with your out-of-control energy usage. But how? With a smart meter. Yes, the new smart meters connect to all your smart appliances, like your TV, home computer, cell phone, hi-fi, heating systems, and a lot more on the way. Carefully monitoring how and where you consume energy. Isn't that great? And once you're on the smart grid, we could even help you manage those smart devices and remotely dial down your energy use. Hey, we're here to help, even though our driving force is profit. For little to no extra cost, smart meters continually emit EMF radiation, broadcasting info about all your behavior to your energy company and other third parties. They'll be able to see what you are doing and when you are doing it. Opening the fridge, switching channels, turning on the light, or running a bath, we'll know, and we'll be able to bill you with absolute accuracy. No more meter readings. Prices may rise, but look at the convenience. Your sleep, anxiety, heart rate, ability to concentrate, general well-being, and blood cells may change in proximity to a smart meter. But you won't need a meter reading. It's a fair compromise. And smart meters have never caught fire. Never. But wait, there's more. We'll even help you plan meal times, too. Once smart meters are everywhere, we'll be able to introduce and one day require time of use charging to help you save money. Want to pay less? Great. Why not have dinner at an off-peak time, say 10 p.m.? We're only thinking of you, Sally. Just like when we dropped our charges after the oil prices plummeted. Not. You'll be able to cook dinner and save money. Isn't that amazing? There's no way a smart grid can be hacked. Millions of different varying devices, all connected wirelessly to one grid, represent no security threat at all to you, your data, or our national power network. A smart grid is a safe grid. What's that, Sally? How do smart meters work? Well, I'm glad you asked. They constantly communicate using non-ionizing radiation spikes at hundreds of times per minute, which we tend not to mention, but keep that under your hat. We'll constantly gather information about what you're doing by recording which appliances you use and when. Our signals are sent wirelessly, along with EMF pollution, in and out of your home using an unrelenting stream of pulsed microwave signals, which are recognized by the WHO as a Class 2B carcinogen. And we'll be able to use your information to help target advertising, provide your lifestyle choices to insurance companies, and warrantless surveillance on who is doing what in your home. So many future applications to help you, Sally. So far, we have had no reports, none at all, of these smart meters bursting into flames. It's just never happened. We realize there's no legal obligation for anyone to accept a smart meter, but we'll keep on implying there is to get as many installed as we can by 2020. Hey, we're making money here. Smart meters.
Who wants a smart meter now? Don't see many hands up. No, joking. Okay, so smart meters health. So some of the things in the video, they communicate using non-ionizing radiation, spikes at hundreds of times per minute. Your sleep, anxiety, heart rate, ability to concentrate, general well-being and blood cells may change when in proximity to a smart meter. Well, we've got a little video on that about what happens to your blood cells, so let's check that one out.
While industry has failed to do any peer-reviewed studies on smart meters and health effects, a growing body of independent research is now starting to accumulate.
In our second set of tests, we're using the smart meter. Before the exposure, we see the same thing as we saw in the first samples. Normal cell walls, fairly separated and looking healthy. So after 2 minutes of exposure in front of the smart meter at about 1 foot away, we see a totally different story. Sample 1, you can see a lot of degradation in the cells. The cell walls have been broken, and you see changes in the cells which are called mycoplasma. It shows a mutation to the cell. In the second sample, we see a different type of degradation to the cell membranes. You can see a corrugation here. This is called bottle cap formation, and it's known that this occurs due to oxidation or exposure to free radicals. So this third subject, when we did her sample, she had to be pulled away from the meter after 45 seconds because she complained about an increasingly severe headache. And here you see a phenomenon called rouleau, where the red blood cells are stacking up, which makes it very difficult for the blood to deliver oxygen to the tissues as they would be their normal function. Every single one of these is a degradation. Every single one of these shows a trauma to the blood cells. And that came from something, and the only variable was the smart meter.
What's going on here? This is a wireless device which is unproven scientifically, which all the evidence so far proves is dangerous or questionable, which should therefore be studied intensely before it's released to the public. Clever people called the technology smart to make it seem intimidating so no one would question it. Some smart ad man came up with that and got paid $300,000 to call it a smart meter so you would feel less knowledgeable, which they know we feel, and then you wouldn't question the smart people putting it in your house. So I call them not smart meters, dangerous meters.
So, signals are sent wirelessly along with EMF, electromagnetic frequency pollution, in and out of your home using an unrelenting stream of pulsed microwave signals, which are recognized by the WHO, the World Health Organization, as a Class 2B carcinogen. What does carcinogen mean? Anybody know? Causes cancer. Substance capable of causing cancer in living tissue. So we've got a doctor now giving us a little bit of insight into electromagnetic radiation and also mentions smart meters. Let's just have a quick listen to him.
I'm Dietrich Klinghardt. I'm a medical doctor. When we look deeper, what is it that has changed in the last 15, 20 years that these chronic infections have become so prevalent? And what we discovered is very simple. It's the exposure to electromagnetic fields. The only thing that parallels the exponential increase in chronic neurological illness, with low-grade depression, the insomnia, the muscle aches and pains, and the fatigue, and the strange neurological symptoms with tingling, numbness, vibration in the body. That increases exponentially. The number of children to be diagnosed autistic doubles every 5 years now. There's no more an issue, well, are we overdiagnosing it? No, it doubles every 5 years. The only thing that parallels that increase is the increased exposure to man-made electromagnetic fields, largely in the high-frequency range. There's some exceptions that have also increased, but largely it's the high-frequency range from cell phone radiation, from the Tetra network that the police and other systems are using. The smart meters are the worst invention that we followed in the last 2 years. There's absolutely devastating consequences that I will share with you. The only development that parallels the exponential increase that we observe in neurological disease is the exponential increase in exposure to man-made electromagnetic fields. So as a scientist, we don't have to look very far, but neurological disease, Parkinson's, MS, ALS, autism, learning disabilities in children, behavioral problem in children, that's all exploding exponentially. And the only thing that fits from an environmental perspective and from an epidemiological perspective is that this is the electromagnetic waves that are penetrating our body that are responsible for this. And fortunately enough, we have good science now.
5G. 5G, what is it? 5G.co.uk. Anyone excited about 5G? Don't see any hands again. 5th generation mobile network. Super fast download speeds, okay? From 5G.co.uk. Can handle multiple high demand applications at once, from connected cars to the IoT, the Internet of Things, and all that jazz. Emergence of more IoT, smart devices, phones, fridges, lights, also drones, RFID chips. What are we putting on our cats and dogs nowadays? We're chipping them. Why is that? Are they going to be connected to the Internet of Things? Smart meters, smart fridges, smart motorways, smart cities, smart phones, smart bins, smart watches, smart baby monitors, smart pills, smart bands, automated lighting, street lamps. We've now got LED street lamps that beam electromagnetic radiation. Why do we need radiation coming out of our street lamps? Pitched as efficient and energy saving. Everything connected, making decisions without human input and massive data gathering. FCC. Anybody know what the FCC is? Federal Communications Commission. It's a government body in the US. Tom Wheeler is the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, a US government agency responsible for regulating the radio, television, and phone industries. The FCC regulates all interstate communications such as wire, satellite, and cable, and international communications. So let's have a little listen to Tom Wheeler, shall we?
The big game changer is that 5G will use much higher frequency bands than previously thought viable for mobile broadband and other applications. Such millimeter wave signals have physical properties that are both a limitation and a strength. They tend to travel best in narrow and straight lines, and they do not go through physical objects as well. But brilliant engineers have developed new antennas that can aim and amplify signals. Now, to make this work, the 5G build-out is going to be very infrastructure intensive, requiring massive deployment of small cells. I'm confident that the actions will lead to a cornucopia of unanticipated, innovative uses and will generate tens of billions of dollars in economic activity. And that's damn important, because it means that U.S. companies will be the first out of the gate. And that is why 5G is a national priority. And stay out of the way of technological development. Unlike some countries, we do not believe that we should spend the next couple of years studying what 5G should be or how it should operate. The future has a way of inventing itself. Turning innovators loose is far preferable to expecting committees and regulators to define the future. We won't wait for the standards. We're already seeing the industry gearing up to seize this opportunity. Verizon and AT&T tell us they'll begin deploying 5G trials in 2017, and the first commercial deployments they're talking about are expected in 2020. And we're not done. As part of our July 14 action, we also plan to ask for comments on opening up other high-frequency bands. Many of the high-frequency bands that we will make available for 5G currently have some satellite users, as well as some Defense Department applications, or at least the possibility of future satellite and defense users. This means sharing will be required between satellite and terrestrial wireless, an issue that is especially relevant in the 28 gigahertz band. But if anyone tells you that they know the details of what 5G is going to become, run the other way. If something can be connected, it will be connected. Hundreds of billions of microchips connected in products from pill bottles to plant waterers. We must reject the notion that the 5G future will be the sole provenance of urban areas. The 5G revolution will touch all corners of our country. A lot more antenna siting decisions by local governments, and tightened our shot clock for siting application reviews. America's local governments will play an important role in determining how we fulfill this national priority. You can be sure of only one thing. The biggest Internet of Things application has yet to be imagined. Tens of billions of dollars in economic activity. And that's damn important.
We absolutely have to stop him, don't we? Yeah! Can I hear that a bit louder? Yeah! Thank you. I don't like that guy very much. Okay. Questions raised over 5G links to cancer as mobile network is tested in Bristol. Did anybody hear about this one? This was just a couple of weeks ago. They tested 5G frequencies on rats. They developed stomach tumours, brain tumours. Brain cancer is now the leading cancer killer of kids. My mother died from a brain tumour in 2014 from her phone. Exactly where she was holding her dock phone. It's a wireless phone, home phone. She used to be wired. Exactly where she was holding it, she developed a tumour and died. That's what got me investigating this. 5G tree threat. New 5G phone system could face reception problems from trees with too many leaves. So how about that? The trees are saving us. Sheffield's council's secret plan to cut down half of its 36,000 trees, despite previously insisting it did not have a target. So obviously the trees are in the way of the 5G. Okay. And Ian Crane's been very kindly talking about that on his channel, about the trees. Millions of trees at risk in secretive network rail felling program. This is just insanity. Danish school experiment with Wi-Fi routers. So they grew some watercress. They had some seeds. they put next to the Wi-Fi router, they had some other ones that they put in another room. The ones in the other room grew. The ones next to the router didn't grow. So this is not just toxic against us, it's all life. As more countries ban iPads and mobile phones from the classroom, could Wi-Fi be giving our children cancer? Okay, Barry Trower, this is someone I met this morning. Physicist, microwave weapons expert, Royal Navy, British Secret Service. He is now advising various people around the world about what they can do about this problem. And he said there's a solution. There are doctors in this country who can actually diagnose and give documentation about harm caused by electromagnetic frequencies. And there's also, you can make a notice of liability that have been given in to these people who have signed off on masts or smart meters, etc. And they've had progress having them removed. So I only chatted with Barry a little bit today, but I got a lot of exciting information from him, and the Empower movement is also a part of that. So I'm going to be keeping my site updated. As soon as I get all the details, I'm going to put it up. I had a video interview with him. The Cooking of Humanity, that's him with Deborah Tavares. It's stopthecrime.net, her website. She also talks about this problem. Li-Fi via LED light bulb data speed breakthrough. Anybody have LED lights in here? LED bulbs? Li-Fi, also a problem. LEDs, they're supposed to be energy efficient, right? Like the smart meters get us on all these energy efficient devices. The incandescents, according to a lot of doctors, the Dr. McCullough and a number of others, they are the healthiest light bulb, and I've got a number of friends in Totnes who requested the traditional ones. Shop at the Top of Town does it, since they've been having eye problems. Medical experts who refuse to use low-energy light bulbs in their homes. Professors have stocked up on old-style bulbs to protect against skin cancer and blindness. Solutions. Holding companies and individuals liable to account for causing harm. Spreading the word about the dangers of wireless technology to others. Getting your home hardwired, LAN cables instead of Wi-Fi. Phone companies can turn off Wi-Fi remotely. So I've got a friend in the audience here, and they did not turn the Wi-Fi off properly over the phone when requested. You have to ask them to do it remotely. It seems very difficult. It seems like a real challenge, but I have friends who have managed to do it because they've got to give you your Wi-Fi, haven't they? Refusing a smart meter, submitting Freedom of Information Acts to seek more information on 5G rollout, giving up smart tech. So I've got one other video.
So hi, my name's Kevin Modis. I'm with the California Brain Tumor Association, but actually collaborate with 10 other groups. One of the groups is emfscientist.org, emfscientist.org. That's 220 doctors and scientists from 39 countries who have looked at health effects from wireless radiation. And from their work and the work of others, we can clearly say that wireless radiation can cause cancer, neurological problems, immune system disorders, and reproductive harm. Clearly, our scientists, along with the other groups I work with, which are composed of people who are developing wireless health effects from their various sources. For instance, people developing brain tumors from their cell phone and the radiation emits. People developing neurological symptoms from the Wi-Fi, from school Wi-Fi. People developing neurological and cancerous health effects from simple smart meters. Smart meters being little wireless meters that are put on people's homes so that the people don't have to come by and read the meter themselves manually. So regardless of the source, and cell towers are the most powerful source of wireless radiation emissions, regardless of the source, the health effects can be the same. So what brings me here today is the rollout of 5G technology. And people need to understand that 5G technology is very different from 2G, 3G, and 4G that preceded it. And that is because the wireless radiation is using a higher frequency. Our current wireless technology uses about 1 gigahertz to 4 gigahertz. This new 5G technology is ultra high frequency, ultra high intensity, and it's 24 gigahertz to 90 gigahertz. To put this in some type of perspective, 90 gigahertz is 90 billion electromagnetic waves per second hitting your body. We know people are already getting sick from the lower frequencies, and we expect, that is our scientists expect, that these higher ultra high frequency microwaves are going to bring people to disease quicker and in a more intense form. The other problem with 5G technology is these microwaves are very short. So our old microwaves were about 2.5 to 3 feet long. These are now about 1 inch to ½ an inch long, and they don't travel very well. So they're going to have to put a little cell tower transmitter in front of about every 2 to 10 homes. Now this is a big problem because we know that cancer rates around regular cell towers are about 3 or 4 times what they normally should be. We also know that there's neurological symptoms that increase as you get closer and closer to a cell tower. Now these new transmitters are going to be placed close to people's homes. It's going to be continuous exposure as with other cell towers, but it'll be emitting a much more higher frequency, high intensity wireless radiation. So we have a tremendous problem that's happening, and people need to understand that the FCC is pushing this technology nationwide. What's also important for people to understand is the FCC is dominated by the wireless industry itself. And the FCC are the people that are given the responsibility and privilege of regulating wireless radiation human exposure standards. So unfortunately, the FCC, whose chairman, who just left and they change with every administration, was the former main lobbyist and the former president of the wireless trade organization CTIA.
So, do we want 5G? Is that a yes or a no? No. What's that? No. Fantastic. So, let's stop this. Let's stop 5G. Thank you very much. Sorry, that's probably too long, wasn't it?
That was great. Thank you, John.
It's all right.
Thanks very much, John, for your great work and your great courage. And John's making great changes. Thank you so much indeed, John. Thank you. And I want to just introduce Brian Gerrish is coming on. Brian's from the UK column. Brian's doing tremendous work to bring out the truth. And Brian is really a midwife for the future of humanity. He shows things on his show which you'd never see on the BBC. So I want to say thank you very much to Brian for doing this fantastic work. Thank you, Brian Gerrish, very much.
So where are we going to come in on this? Well, really, what I wanted to do is say, let's talk about policy, because nothing appears without it being discussed somewhere and somebody coming up with the agenda to make it happen. It doesn't matter what the subject is, somebody somewhere has sat in a room discussing what they think should happen, and that's then translated into policy, and the policy is then pushed through the political system, and then it becomes factual in as much as it's implemented. It can be supported by rules and regulation, wider law, can be enforced by the law. But whatever we see coming in, we've got to think in terms of policy, and I'm going to keep pushing. Policy doesn't create itself. Policy is created by men and women sitting in rooms discussing things. And often, of course, they're sitting in rooms which are semi-secret. Chatham House rules. You can talk about what was said, but not who said it, or they're secret in as much as you never even knew the meeting took place. Here's a bit of a definition of policy: a course or principle of action adopted or proposed by an organisation or individual. And archaic was quite interesting because it said prudent or expedient conduct or action. But there we are. We know that people are talking about adopting a particular thing. And 5G's coming along. I went for a quick look on the internet, see what I could see with regard to 5G and policy, and I found this article. I read it. My point is just that here's 5G, and we happen to have it alongside the magic word of policy. And this was quite an interesting article. from Spectrum, so you can always go and have a read of it yourself. But this bit was particularly interesting because it says in March this year, the UK government published a 5G strategy. My view is it opens the door to start moving towards a more sensible vision for 5G. Well, for strategy, read policy, because what that little insert is talking about is the fact that the government policy is to bring 5G in, whether or not we like it. In fact, has it ever been discussed with the wider public? I'm going to suggest it hasn't. So we've got lots of different types of policy at the moment. This is a very topical one because we've got censorship. This is coming in very, very quickly. The predictions of a lot of people are that next year we can expect to see new legislation aiming to try and shut down alternative and free media sites. Why do I think this is happening? I think this is happening because the government is getting very, very worried about the amount of alternative media and the fact that alternative media is now pumping out very good material. There's a lot of people now joining in, doing videos, but they're producing material which is accurate, it's evidence-based, and this is starting to give the government a problem. So we can expect to see more on the censorship policy. If it really comes in, we're going to lose the UK column. I work, of course, alongside Mike Robinson with the UK column. We have done now for however long it is, 10 plus years. But we know they're slowly but surely coming after us. Whatever we think of Alex Jones, we can see that they're going for him as well. And if we do not have free speech, then of course we are very quickly into a dictatorship. It's very dangerous times, but it all comes from a policy. Here's the Liberal Democrat voice, devolution to the English regions. Well, where did the devolution policy come from? I'm going to suggest that part of this policy, where the government says this is giving more power at local level, is one of the biggest lies told, because the regional policy is effectively European Union policy, where the aim is to draw us into the European superstate. But nevertheless, whether you agree with it or not, the key thing is this is a policy. Accelerating growth, Edinburgh, South East Scotland City Region deal. Well, this is another very major policy which they're pushing in, where forget about your country, what you're interested in is city-states. And the city-states are now moving into AI and cross-border. Maybe Graham Downing will mention that a bit, but he's taught me quite a lot about this. So if you've never heard of the city region policy, there's a policy, somebody in a room discussed it. Who were they? Now, this really annoys me, this sort of thing, because we're not to think like this young lady, because she's got a hijab on. We're not to think like that. The BBC thinks that we should think like this. And this is being pushed very, very, very hard. So what we've got is a social morality policy. The one on the right is wrong. The one on the left is supposedly correct. Now, maybe a reasonable person would say perhaps there's a balance in the middle, but I hope you get my point. The BBC is enacting a policy, and that policy is an attack on social morality by promoting, it's not Lady Gaga, I always get it wrong, it's Madonna, isn't it? But there's more and more of these sort of photographs, and there are more and more images, particularly targeted at young people. So my point is, which is the one we feel more comfortable with? And for me, it's not the BBC, but it's policy. We've got a policy apparently enforced to protect prisoners and make sure that they get medical care. Some of you might recognise this lady down here, Melanie Shaw. She's an abuse survivor and whistleblower. She has had unbelievable abuse inside the English prison system, including over 18 months in solitary confinement, which the UN defines as torture. And for one long period, you might just make it out down here, she had a major leg ulcer, which was never treated the whole time she was in prison. In fact, she was given dishcloths to use as bandages. Right? Now, there is a policy that the government looks after prisoners, but of course that policy is an utter lie. So I'm just gently saying to you that even where we see the government talking about a policy, it doesn't have to be a real policy, because they might think they can get political public advantage out of lying to the public. We can see it in other areas. I'm sort of sticking on a theme here, but there's Ted Heath. I believe Ted Heath was a vicious paedophile. I don't have any doubts about that personally. Melanie Shaw is pretty sure about that as well, the lady who's in prison. But on the right is a prison governor, and that prison governor has been making up her own law effectively, because she's prevented social workers getting into the prison to see Melanie, which they should do. They have an obligation under law because Melanie's registered disabled. But the prison governor has made sure those social workers have never got in to see Melanie. And more recently, she's also blocked the visits of legal team for Melanie. So this lady seems to be able to make up her own policy despite the law. So now we're getting in a little bit deeper. We've got a law, but apparently the law only fits certain people, and it depends what the policy is. I can't resist putting up Theresa May, because of course she was the woman who was Home Secretary when this vulnerable lady went into prison, so ultimately all the decisions rested with her. But as you can see at the bottom left, she was more interested in attacking Trump than she was in protecting this immensely vulnerable lady on the right. So Theresa May stands on the world stage. Her policy is, I protect women. No, she doesn't, because this lady has been brutalised under her very system, but it's policy. Now, this is one which probably motivates some of you, vaccines. There is no law in this country which says you or your children have to be vaccinated. That is fact. In fact, there is a test case recently where a lady made sure that she challenged the fact that she was being told that her children needed vaccinations, and she won that case, and the judge in his findings said that if the children were to be forcibly vaccinated by the local authority, that would amount to assault. But the basis in UK today is that there is no law in place which says that you must vaccinate your children. Despite that, the government is pushing and pushing for people to be vaccinated, and this is the sort of information they use to form the policy. It's okay because the World Health Organization says so. Policy. And if the government says it, of course, the NHS is absolutely hammering it. So never mind the law, the NHS is pushing that people should be vaccinated. There's a test case at the moment with a young man who was going to do a physiotherapy course at Cardiff University. They said he had to be vaccinated. He asked for the documentation in the university. None was produced. So he fought and said there is no law. And they said you can't do the course. When he tried to log on to a course at another university in UK, he was found he was blocked in all of them. But there is no law to say that he or anybody else must be vaccinated. So now we've got a real twist. We can see that the government can produce policy which is actually counter to our own law, but it doesn't matter. They're desperate to get that policy through. Our police, do we have any police in the audience today? I hope we do, because we're always keen to talk to them. So maybe there is, maybe there isn't. We don't know. Here's the police. Here's a policy. The programs will transform how police use technology, make it easier for the public to engage with police online, and boost capacity to deal with major threats. This is all about the police beginning to group together. In Scotland, where there was originally 8, I think, different police forces, they've all amalgamated into one, Police Scotland. So if the police are involved in anything untoward, who is the independent authority that investigates them? There is only one police force, there's one state. So Scotland is getting very dangerous on the policy that the police were all to be amalgamated, and that is the policy that is being pushed very quickly here. So you might have heard about Devon and Cornwall Police amalgamating with Somerset and Dorset Police. This is part of the regionalisation policy. This one, when we discovered it, I just found absolutely horrific. This is the BBC's charity, BBC Media Action, boasting that they had people on the ground in Syria in 2004 working with the opposition to essentially help achieve regime change. And my question is, was this just BBC policy, or was this actually government Foreign Office policy? Here she is boasting that the BBC was in that country working with people in the opposition. Were they reasonable opposition? Were they dangerous opposition? Were they terrorists? We've no way of knowing. But this is a charity, supposedly, but it's clearly enacting a policy. And if you look at the funding for BBC Media Action, you'll find that a lot of the money comes from government sources. It comes from the US, it comes from, I think it was Denmark, and UK, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office as well. So it's policy, and first comes the policy, and then comes the event. None of this discussed with the British public. And the law is under big attack at the moment. So this lady, Lady Hale, spoke out recently, and she said that basically the courts, judiciary, the whole of the legal system is, she said, facing serious challenges, but challenge is a new word for problem. That's what we would have called it many years ago. It was a problem, a very big problem. And this leads us to the point at the moment that there is a policy that the law as we've known it is to be changed. So I say to you as an audience, are you all aware that many courts are closing? It's getting more difficult to get to a local court, and many of the courts are now banning the public from actually going into the court. And even if you do go into the court, as the people who went into Melanie Shaw's court case said in Leeds, the public were behind an opaque screen. Melanie was behind about 4 inches of safety glass, so they could neither see justice being done and they couldn't hear it properly. But this is the state of courts in UK. And the policy is that people will not necessarily appear in court in person because they can be brought in by a video link. And if you think of the implications of that, it means none of the human characteristics that we often rely upon. What was the expression on somebody's face? What were they doing? What was their body language? What did you feel about them? All of that taken away, you will just have a person on a video link. And what we've seen with Melanie and other cases is those video links have mysteriously failed. Just at the moment, Melanie and other people were able to start putting their own defence forward. So there is a policy at the moment. The courts are going to be closed. More AI is going to be brought into the court system. And this has never, ever been debated in a public capacity. Well, Bob Neal, chair of the Justice Committee, an effective criminal justice system is one of the pillars on which the rule of law is built. This is all to do with a funding crisis because there's no money, but if we get into where money comes from, we can see that this is a created problem. I haven't got time to get into it in detail, but I'm just going to suggest to you that all the problems in the court at the moment is policy which is being created. He went on a bit here because he says there's a common law right to legal advice, but actually the policy in the legal system over a great many years has been to remove common law. And this is very, very dangerous because it's the common law which gives us all the protections as human beings. All of the statute law, rule after rule after rule, thousands of them, this has mainly come in using the European system, where essentially you're guilty until proved innocent. But what we can say with great confidence is there's a policy being enacted at the moment to completely destroy common law. So here we are, policy. It doesn't just happen on its own. The moment you're on the trail of policy, the 5G policy, who made that decision? And this is where it gets quite difficult, because basically you don't necessarily know. I'm just using an example here, but if we talk about immigration, no doubt that will start some twitches. But this man, Peter Sutherland, Bilderberger, immense power, including with the UN, said that we need more immigration, not for the benefit of the people moving, but in order to break down nation states. The immigrants were to be used as a cruel tool in order to break down nation states. He's died. I don't think that's a great loss, but an immensely powerful man and immensely powerful work in the Bilderbergers. So when we talk about immigration as a policy, where was it created? We start to get a clue, because this is a man prepared to discuss how it was created and why. Just an example. Here's David Cameron, and Ken Clarke was saying that if there was a Brexit vote, he would have to resign. So my point is that somebody in the Tory party was producing a policy. And it seems in this case that Ken Clarke was one of the leaders of it. If anybody's done a bit of research on the internet, you might like to look at the names Ken Clarke and Ben Fellows and see what you find. Here's the 2013, is it, Bilderberg meeting. These people were assembled in rooms behind closed doors to discuss things. There were no minutes produced for the public. There were no notes produced for the public. But we had senior bankers meeting with senior members of the British parliamentary system. My question is, what was discussed behind closed doors? And my strong guess is that those bankers weren't there for fun. What they were doing is discussing policy, their policies. So we're in a tremendously dangerous state in this country at the moment, because there's this veneer that everything is okay, but actually when we really get into it, we see that under the surface, it's corporate banking interests which are the power base, and it's their policies which are coming through. And I'm going to suggest to you that if we get into the 5G argument, we will start to see it's those big corporate telecommunications companies which say we need 5G. It's not the public saying we need it, please give it to us. It's you need it, we're going to make sure you have it. But it's easy to start following the trail of who's got the power base. Well, if we look at the Conservatives, let's just run through how they really work. It's the same for all the major political parties. We need a puppet who's respectable, and then we've got to reinforce the puppet with big funders. Conservative Party couldn't work without funding. Same with Labour, same with the Lib Dems. So if you want to know where the power base is, you've got to go for the funders. We've got to have powerful lobbyists. These are the first line of the policy makers. And it is amazing to see the power that comes in behind the Conservatives. Now, I've mentioned Conservative Friends of Israel there. There are Friends of Israel across all the parties, but I've put it in there because they have and boast about their power within the Conservative Party. Their power to influence over 80 and maybe 90 MPs now. And I've often said, I don't particularly mind that this is Israel, it could be Italy, I would still be concerned. So, policy. We've got a cabinet office which acts in a very secretive way now, making a huge amount of policy, never debated in Parliament, and not even the backbenchers, know what is necessarily happening in the cabinet office. Conservative Central Office, this is where it starts to get nasty, because this is where MPs are controlled, the Conservative MPs are controlled. We've got a PR team, you've got to be able to spin the news, you've got to be able to pull the wool over people's eyes. And if anybody doesn't know about the Behavioural Insights team, then you need to. I'm going to show you a bit more on that. But we are now into realms that they're not even just changing what we do through open policy, they're now using applied behavioural psychology to change our behaviour without us knowing it. And I'm going to prove that in a minute. So where can we go? Well, we've got conservative associations, we've got the grassroots people, we've got the change agents, we'll move on to them in a minute. They're people pushing policy. And we've got the backbench MPs. I couldn't resist putting Gary Streeter and Johnny Mercer in because having had some dealings with these two, they have not got a clue what's going on. Johnny Mercer even said so effectively, publicly, that he didn't really know what went on at the higher levels. So there's your elected representative, or for some people, doesn't know what's going on. And this is where it gets nasty, because then we've got the whips. And what the whip's about, we're there to make sure you follow conservative policy. And we know how this works because this man, Tim Fortescue, is on a BBC video. If you just Google or search for Tim Fortescue, you can see a video clip where he tells you that when he was a whip, MPs came to them with all sorts of problems. It could be anything, it could be little boys. And we fixed it because, well, if we fixed it for them, they would do as we asked. Here is a Conservative MP, former whip, admitting that they used blackmail over subjects like the abuse of children in order to force through Tory policy. Welcome to Britain in 2018, but of course that was going on back in 1973. This is Heath administration. You can go and see that yourself. And then we've got all the Conservative voters who vote Conservative because they don't know this is going on. If you think I'm picking on the Tories, it applies to Labour and the other parties equally. So this is unfortunately the world we think we live in. So we elect these people. They've got an orchestrated force, the civil service, which is apolitical, and the civil service helps put the policy together, and then that looks after our welfare. But that's absolutely not what's going on, because all of these organisations, this is a tiny fraction of them, are the organisations forming policy. Their common purpose, there's the Young Foundation, there's the Roundtree Foundation, there's various leadership ones, there's the Work Foundation, Oxford University Said Business School. It goes on and on and on and on and on. And these are the people forming policy. And now what they're doing is pushing that policy through a new created sector, which Tony Blair, I think, initially called the third sector. But it's that mass of organisations, charities, non-government organisations, which form the policy, and the policy is then pushed into the civil service to become enacted at law and to come out onto the streets. So we're stuck in this column here. We think we're in a democracy. No, we're not, because all those other agencies are the ones driving the political agenda. And how can they do that? Well, of course, they can do it because they've got shed loads of money coming in. So if you research any of those organisations, try the Young Foundation, because that's tied in with Dartington, you'll find that huge amounts of money are coming into the background. Common Purpose, one pernicious charity that I've spent years trying to expose. How was it that this lady knew in 2007 that there was going to be a joining up of the Conservatives and the Lib Dems, a coalition? How did she know? The public didn't know. And look at the word she used, guile. That to me means deceit. Had they got sufficient guile to form this? So buried in the heart of government, you've got Common Purpose. And what's Common Purpose doing? Forming policy. And the policy coming out of Common Purpose is not nice. So the policy gets implemented, and you really need to know about this. How many people in this room have read about the Behavioural Insights team? Yeah, very few, right? This outfit was initially buried in the Cabinet Office. It's now, what do they call it, a social interest company or something like that. These people were working right at the heart of the government to show how our behaviour could be changed without us knowing they'd done it. This is not a joke, this is absolutely real. You can see this afterwards by freezing it on screen if you watch the video. But this is a bit about them and what they say they're there to do. It's all good stuff. If they treat us the right way, we'll pay our taxes a bit quicker. So I'm going to move on. Here's some of the people. I have to put my glasses on for this. So Dan is best known for his work on choice architecture as it relates to retirement saving and organ donation. Do you feel comfortable with that? Retirement saving and organ donation. Who is he? He's a Microsoft man, working within a department of the British government, boasting about using applied psychology to change people's behaviour. And I will tell you as a fact that NHS hospitals now harvesting organs, not only from elderly people, but also from very young people. The reports coming in are constant, they're accurate, they're from different parts of the country. It's very, very dangerous stuff. So what was that man doing? We've got Richard Thaler. He's one of the experts on using this applied psychology. So he's working with the British government. Nick here is a professor of behavioural science at Warwick Business School. These are shrinks playing with our minds. So we've got a behavioural insights team man, Rockefeller Foundation, Santander, Prudential Insurance. They're messing around with behavioural science, but they're also big money people. They're really interested in profit. This lady I didn't like the look of, Director of Behaviour and Health Research at the University of Cambridge. Particularly interventions targeting non-conscious processes. All right? Gus O'Donnell, it was blank. But this is a very dangerous man because he's been heavily involved with Common Purpose. He was called God at one stage because he was so powerful within the Cabinet Office. Civil servant, my opinion, a very dangerous person. So here's the Behavioural Insights team that 95% of this room didn't know about. And these are the people linked with it. What do we know about these people? What do we know about their morality, their values? Nothing. And yet these are the people producing policy. And this is the document. You can just go and search for this online. It's called Mindspace. And it is, what does it say here? Influencing behaviour through public policy. Mindspace effects depend at least partly on automatic influences on behaviour. This means that citizens may not fully realise that their behaviour is being changed, or at least how it's being changed. Would you trust Tony Blair to change your behaviour? No. This is where it gets serious. We have no idea who these people are, but they are forming policy. And there's a lot of words about it which you can read about how this thing works. But that document, you just search for Mindspace PDF, you can read it and check it yourselves. And here is Tony Blair boasting that he is very good at absorbing others' pain. I think he gets off on the pain, actually, which is why he's helped create so many wars. But this man was winding up Common Purpose and was winding up Behavioural Insights. So this is not a joke, I'm not making it up. These people were implementing this stuff to change the way we think. Here's Gary Streeter. He doesn't know what's going on. When I tried to point out to him that the submarine fleet, the nuclear submarine fleet, couldn't go to sea. I'm an ex-Navy guy of many years ago, but a professional military person originally. I got a load of abuse back from him. The fact was we possibly had one operational nuclear submarine. The bombers, the ballistic boats were at sea. The others were in a pitiful state. And the same with the frigates. And all he gave me was abuse. So arrogance and ignorance is what allows this policy issue to go through. So what's the ultimate policy? Well, it's this. You might have heard of big society. David Cameron talked about it. It was in the press and the media for a while and then it disappeared. Well, it didn't disappear because the policy ultimately is to control every single aspect of our lives. This is Cabinet Office, I call it a wiring diagram, organisation chart. But basically this shows us that the behavioural insights and the big society element was core to all the government's policies. Not saving the NHS, not helping people sleeping on the streets, but how they could actually get better at getting into our heads in order to form a new policy for a new society where everybody would be controlled by the government. This is not 1984. So people make policy, look for what they do, don't go by labels, don't treat them all as a group, look at the people, research them as individuals, but it's what they do and say gives the clue. And you should be worried, but this is the key thing, action immediately stops the worry. So if you leave this thing tonight feeling a bit jittery, what can you do in a simple way to help counter it? That's the key bit. Pick up the phone, send an email, contact a friend, do something. And I'm going to say it's events like this with people like Jason, I nearly said Justin, sorry, which make the difference. So I say that 5G didn't arrive as an accident, it came out of policy. Who created the policy? I don't know. Perhaps we can find out. Thanks very much.
I'd like to invite a guest to the stage. He's been doing amazing work. I went to one of his events a few months ago and 5G came up. We had a lot of amazing speakers. He started the whole anti-fracking movement in the UK. I'd like to welcome to the stage Ian Crane.
This is a bit impromptu, but thank you for the invitation. Thank you all for coming. We can do something about this. 7 years ago, people said you won't stop fracking in the UK. It's now 6 years since the moratorium was lifted in this country, and there hasn't yet been another frack in this country. Unfortunately, we are on the brink of possibly the well at Preston New Road being fracked. But if they do, even if they do, and hopefully it'll go wrong, but even if they do, that'll still be the only frack this side of 2020. The anti-fracking community, I believe, is the nursery for 5G. Because the anti-fracking community has been built on a model that the establishment have no idea how to deal with. And this is not establishing an NGO, it's building local community groups. So right around the country now we have well over 1,000 local community groups all working autonomously, independently, but they are networked through social media. But they are working within their community to prevent the unconventional gas industry from becoming established. Now, by comparison, stopping fracking was easy compared to 5G. Mark isn't actually gagged just yet, but he's due in court on Monday, where Gateshead Council are seeking an injunction, effectively a gagging order, and also preventing him from making any contact with people in the local authority because of the information he's trying to share. Now, this is bordering on fixated threat. Now, we don't know very much about fixated threat in this country, even though we've had a fixated threat commission since 2003. But in Australia, the fixated threat has been used to forcibly medicate a former executive of AGL, one of the unconventional gas companies in Australia, that has caused tremendous damage in the eastern states of Australia. And because, of course, she is a former executive with AGL, then clearly what she has to share has some impact. So the Australian government have identified her as having a fixated threat and have effectively sectioned her and subjected her to forcible medication. And don't think for one moment that this isn't ultimately the game plan here. The policy for what we are seeing being rolled out here was established in 1932. And it's in print, it's a document called Technocracy Inc., written by Howard Scott and a gentleman by the name of Marion King Hubbard, who some may or know from his other revelation about peak oil in 1947, which was introduced to effectively create artificial scarcity of hydrocarbons to encourage people to pay more for them. So we always see the same players cropping up. But they wrote a document in 1932 called Technocracy Inc., which effectively spells out their vision for total control. What they had in 1932 was the vision. What they didn't have was the technology. Now they have the technology. If you can't locate a copy of Technocracy Inc., then you will be able to locate a copy of Zbigniew Brzezinski's book, written in 1969, published in 1970, called Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era. He wrote that nearly 30 years after Technocracy Inc. What he did was updated it, and effectively that is still the model for the global control grid. And in that book, Brzezinski makes the observation. He says, humanity will be effectively controlled by technocrats, and I quote, who are not constrained by traditional liberal values. In other words, they'll do whatever it is that they feel they need to do to establish their total control grid, which is a corporate control grid. And because corporatocracy is driven by profit for a few, you'll notice that there's one thing we haven't heard too much about tonight, and that's ethics. Because the corporatocracy does not want ethics to get in the way of its quest for maximizing profit for a very small number of people. And what I was able to prove in the courts just a few weeks ago in Manchester, where I was challenging the attempt by Quadrilla to establish an injunction against any effective protest. And I knew that I was going to lose the case because I knew exactly what case law the judge was going to hide behind. But what I wanted to be able to demonstrate was that parliamentary law in this country is totally subordinated to corporate law. So parliamentary law only effectively exists whilst it protects the corporations, whilst it protects commerce. The moment that commerce, the corporations, believe that criminal law no longer protects them, then they can go to the courts and get an injunction to prevent any opposition. And that injunction is in place right now, effectively prevents any form of protest which causes Quadrilla to lose money. And if that is the case, it doesn't even need someone to be charged with a criminal act. But if Quadrilla feel that somebody has taken an action which has cost them money, then they can go to the civil courts with the evidence and effectively get compensation from that individual. And if that individual hasn't got the means to provide them with the financial compensation, then they're at risk of losing their liberty. So obstructing the highway, which carries a maximum fine up to £1,000, so if somebody feels that they want to exercise their protest by walking in front of a truck, then the risk, the maximum risk that they have is being found guilty of obstruction of the highway and up to £1,000 fine, which is rarely administered. But now you could lose your liberty, and this is what the corporations are able to achieve. So we are in a situation right now where humanity is not just under attack, but humanity is being blatantly and flagrantly treated with absolute contempt. And the phone masts are a classic example of that contempt. Because 2 years ago, the legislation was changed via statutory instrument, which I won't bore you with the detail of, but it's a way of changing law without it going through Parliament. But the statutory instrument was introduced to amend the planning laws so that phone masts are now permitted development. In other words, a phone mast can be put up wherever the phone companies feel they want to put up the mast. And with 5G, as you've heard here, the phone masts have to be on a grid of an absolute maximum of every 300 meters. So we are not just looking at 50,000 phone masts that we have around the country right now. It's going to be well over 1 million. And that's why they're targeting the cities first. And the permitted development allows them to replace the existing phone masts, because up to 2016, the maximum height of a phone mast could be 15 meters. Now it can be 25 meters without any planning permission. And that's on unprotected land. In other words, anything that isn't effectively like a national park or an area of special scientific interest, where they can still put a phone mast, but it has to be, I think it's below 15 meters. But what we're going to be seeing, of course, is these phone masts being heightened in readiness for 5G, which is being planned to be rolled out not just in the UK, but globally in 2020. So earlier this year, for the first time, we were able to establish the very, very clear link between the tree removal program in Sheffield and the rollout of 5G. And it doesn't take too many, building blocks to get the link. Some have been mentioned tonight. First of all, Amy, which is the Spanish company that has the contract to remove 17,500 trees from the city of Sheffield, is a partner with Telefonica, which is known as O2 in this country. And they have the contract for setting up the basic 5G grid in the north of England. And if you were ever in any doubt about the issue of trees, then look no further than the promo video that Bournemouth City Council put out, talking about the work that they were doing with Ordnance Survey and with consultants to seek out the best location for the 5G transmitters. And in that video, they actually acknowledged that even hanging baskets have a negative impact on the 5G signal. And the document that Mark referred to, this is the University of Surrey document, which is from the University of Surrey's Centre of 5G Excellence, a bit of a contradiction of terms there, but which is an academic body working in conjunction with industry. And in that white paper, which you can find very easily, just put in University of Surrey 5G and trees, and what you'll find is that section 3.1 of that white paper spells out the negative effect that trees and foliage have on the 5G signal. Now, it's not the trees per se, or the foliage per se, it's the moisture within the trees and the foliage. Because what this document acknowledges is that basically the trees are a problem, trees in foliage are a double problem, trees in foliage with rain on them are a total nightmare, which caused the 5G network to effectively shut down. So the problem is the moisture, the problem is the water. And what are we made of? Right, this is an attack on humanity. Now there's multiple attacks going on. Too many to list here. And not everybody is affected in the same way by every element of this attack, this assault on humanity. And basically, the establishment know that with the advancement of artificial intelligence, the number of people needed in employment over the next 15, 20, 40 and more years is going to reduce dramatically. There may be new jobs emerge, but the forecasts show, the economic forecasts show that the number of people in employment is going to be greatly reduced from what we have today. So consequently, unless people are contributing directly to the corporatocracy, they are effectively an unnecessary liability in the mindset of these socio-psychopaths. So consequently, if some people get sick because they're not able to survive in a high EMF environment or a high methane content environment, any kind of toxicity, then that's just unfortunate because they are collateral damage. And what the corporatocracy wants is just those who are able to survive in this toxic environment and those who are effectively willing to be slaves to the corporations. The rest, if they fall by the wayside, that's just unfortunate. And if you think that this isn't what's coming, then look no further than the reports that are emerging in the mainstream media. Earlier this year it was acknowledged that there was an 11.3 increase in the number of deaths in the first 16 weeks of this year over the average for the same period over the last 5 years. And it's not the usual suspects, it's not people in their 60s, 70s and older, it's people in their 20s, 30s and 40s that are dying. There's no explanation. The government has said it's going to set up a study. We are going to see an increase in the death rates, and that's exactly what the establishment wants. And they work on the basis that they can get away with this because no one's really going to pick up on it, and those that do can just be dismissed as rampant conspiracy theorists. This is what they rely on, shutting down the discussion, shutting down the debate. It's why they're trying to shut down the social media, because they know that fewer and fewer people are now deriving their worldview from a single source, and certainly not from the mainstream media. And people are using their own discretion and discernment to determine what they perceive to be truth. And that's not necessarily correlating with the output from the mainstream media. And the establishment knows this, which is why they're also making the attack on social media. So we have an enormous challenge, but we also have a tremendous opportunity. And that opportunity is to reconnect within communities. And this is what I see happening within the anti-fracking communities all around the country. Where it's meetings like this. And especially when an area is specifically targeted. So right now I'm spending a lot of time up in North Nottinghamshire. We had a very, very successful campaign in North Yorkshire last year where we prevented North Yorkshire from being subjected to the first frack in this country. Now I'm in North Nottinghamshire where we're trying to raise awareness within the communities in Lincolnshire, North Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire and South Yorkshire, with some considerable success, but it's done the traditional way, through flyers, through the letterboxes, through knocking on people's doors and talking to them and asking if they know what's going on. And when a rig rocks up, then it's amazing how all the seeds that have been planted then start to germinate and people really start to take an interest. And what you have down here in the situation at Park School, where my youngest son attended before he went to Steiner and now to Kevitz. But what you have here is an opportunity to really start planting the seeds as to why that foam mask is a problem. And although it may seem like it's going to be tough going, we don't have very long because the rollout for 5G is scheduled for 2020. So we have to use whatever social networks we have in place today and also look to obviously expand them. Because when 5G hits, it's not just going to be a few target areas around the north of England and a few in the southeast, which fracking is targeting right now, this is going to be nationwide. And whereas fracking is targeting the rural areas first, 5G is going to target the urban areas first, and then it will be rolled out into the rural parts of the country. So it's really important that, you know, the work of Mark Steele, who's an inventor, an engineer, and has a lot of experience of EMF technology, and Graham Downing, because these guys, you know, they have a proven track record within the sphere of science. And, you know, they're not going to rely on conjecture or hearsay. They are looking at the documented evidence. And one of the common denominators is that any report that you see coming out of academia on 5G frequencies have one thing in common. They all call for a moratorium until the technology has been properly tried and tested. But what is happening is we are seeing the traditions of democracy just ridden roughshod right over. The only reason democracy is allowed to exist at the moment is because it's not getting in the way of the corporatocracy. As soon as it does get in the way of corporatocracy, then we see how the corporations try to lobby to get changes made to the processes so that then they can just sort of ride roughshod, which is obviously where this permitted development comes in. So it's great that John and Jason have established this meeting here in Totnes, and hopefully something will, you know, grow out of this, an awareness, because let me tell you that although this area is not targeted for fracking, the local anti-fracking community have been very, very supportive of the wider campaign. And it's thanks to the local anti-fracking community lobbying Sarah Wollaston that in March of this year, Sarah Wollaston asked Claire Perry, the Minister of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, some very, very poignant questions regarding the fracking process. And the responses that Sarah Wollaston got from Claire Perry gave the anti-fracking community enormous ammunition to use elsewhere in the country. So just because an area isn't targeted, and Totnes may not necessarily be right at the top of the list, but nonetheless, the people of Totnes can make an enormous difference. So thank you so much for setting up tonight.
Thanks, Ian, for your great work. I saw Ian so many years ago with the fracking. Ian has saved the country. Thank you so much, Ian.
And not many
communities. No, thank you so much. Thanks. Yeah, it is the communities, but you actually got those communities going and made them believe in themselves, Ian. I really appreciate it. You're a hero, mate. And thank you. Justin Walker, new Chances Movement wants to say a few words, and I know it's running late. I'm sorry we haven't got much time left, but thanks, Justin, for your great work.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am going to be very brief indeed. But the first thing I'm going to say is, I came here in a rather arrogant mode. I thought I knew it all. Oh dear. I've had one of those days where I've learnt a heck of a lot. Now, very quickly, do not feel as though the enemy is going to win. They're not. Now, I've been trying to find out who they are for 30-odd years. My late uncle went to the very first Bilderberg. He was a director of the Bank of England. I was groomed to become a useful idiot for the insiders. Luckily, fate decreed otherwise. I spent 30 years examining who these people are. We are against these psychopaths. They number no more than 8,000 to 10,000 people in the whole world. We're a population of 7 billion. There are around 8,000 to 10,000 Tom Wheelers, that man we saw spouting. They are psychopaths. They control the world's money supply through an organisation most of you have never heard of, the Bank for International Settlements. That is their oxygen. We believe that we have to be taxed, and if we can't produce enough money, our government borrows from the private banks. This is absolute baloney. We can issue and create our own money. We've done it before and we'll do it again. But I'm not here to talk about money. What I've heard tonight about 5G is extremely frightening. And what I've just heard Ian say, and he's done a magnificent job with the fracking movement, we now have got to mobilise. It's numbers that are going to win this. That mast in Dartington, 200 people, 300 people should just go down there with cutters and take it down. What are the police going to do? I watched the film Gandhi a few days ago. I know it's a film, I know Dickie Attenborough, fiction. Well, it wasn't fiction, it was largely based on facts. But what did Gandhi do? He just got the people to stand up and say no. And peacefully just go and do what they had to do to get their freedom. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do it peacefully. And we've started a thing called the Chartists. Now, this is not starting a big new organisation that's going to take over. Far from it. Because I agree with what Ian said. This is, I suppose, guerrilla warfare. Peaceful guerrilla warfare. We have all got to rise up in our communities and educate our fellow human beings, because it's ignorance that is allowing these psychopaths to get away with what they're doing. Now, I reckon we've only got 2 years, and that seems to be the general consensus. We've got till 2020. So we've all in this room who are convinced we've just got to get out there, talk to shopkeepers, go into cafes. Absolutely agree. Don't even try and win the battle on Facebook and on the internet. You won't. The trolls are waiting for you. No, this is about human being talking to human being. And we can do it. Now, we've drawn up the People's Charter. 6 requirements. Now, these 6 requirements, I'm not going to read them all now. I promised you I was only going to speak briefly. But number 6 says, the assurance that science always serves and benefits all of humanity whilst protecting the natural well-being of our planet. Now I'm going to... Thank you. We are actually going to have to rewrite that little section, because 5G now is clearly the most important part of what we've been saying here. And it is also the vulnerable part of our enemy. Because if they can't roll this stuff out, and we've seen what's happening in China, they can't win. So if we take back our right to control, issue and control our own money supply, and stop 5G, we've won. So that's our job. And as Ian says, we've just got to get all the local people together. And I'm just going to give you one, what I call the razor blade test. Because what we're up about, what we're involved with today is good versus evil. That's it. I'm not a religious Bible thumper or anything like that, but I recognise goodness and I recognise evil. And you've got to look at the child abuse that's going on to see it. Good versus evil. In between those two is a razor blade, not a wall to sit on, not a grey area for the politicians to prevaricate in, and to give reasons why they shouldn't be doing anything. No, it's a bloody razor blade. Because it's good versus evil. Which side are we all on? We know which side we're on, but good. What about the politicians? What about all the decision makers? What about the Greens? I was in the Green Party from 1975 to 1992, long before it was fashionable to do so. I was inspired by Jacques Cousteau. The Greens have been hijacked by Agenda 21. The Greens at the moment don't recognise there's a problem with smart meters. Totnes is a green town. Okay, Greens, listen in, guys, and you're talking from one of the founders of the Green Party. Get your act together. Join us. Anyway, I've talked long enough. I've talked enough. Thank you all for coming. I've got copies of the Charter here. As I said, it's open to change. It's not concrete stone, but please, if you'd like to take one tonight, they're just here. Thank you very much indeed. And we're going to win.
Thank you, Justin. Justin, what a warrior for truth. Thank you very much. Right, finally, Anna Finlayson, who organises, she did most of this, and she sat down there, and you did most of this. Thank you, Anna, for your great work.
Thank you, Jason. Just quickly to say, in response to what has already been said, this is always going to be the beginning. This meeting was always a beginning. It's a catalyst, it's an opening. We have another meeting on November the 3rd, where we want to have a community dialogue. We want to invite you all. If you want to put your emails down, we'll let you know, and where it's going to be, because this is the beginning. This meeting this evening is just the beginning, to take back our power, to understand so that we're informed and we have wisdom and power that way, and also to learn more about the common law, the principles that Justin's just outlined, some of them, because it starts on the fundamental principle of the withdrawal of our consent. We never consented to this. They go along on the basis of implied consent. It's called tacit consent, implied consent, and we never consented to this. So the first thing is withdrawal of our consent, and the second is declaration of our sovereignty.
Well said, Anna. Well said, Anna. Wonderful. My goodness, it's nice to see women giving it a bit, right? Come on. Sick of it. We need more women to come forward and come on, you know. Not to over-masculinize and become like Hillary Clinton, that's another thing. But Jackie's a counsellor and she's been fighting against the masts. Thank you, Jackie, so much from Totnes.
Thank you. I just want to straighten something out. I am actually a Green. And the Greens are doing things. I mean, who else knows of an MP that got arrested for the fracking, against fracking, which was our Caroline Lucas, our leader, party leader at the moment, and an MP. But I just wanted to say about the mast in Dartington, because I've written to the Secretary of State. I was with the group that protested, and that was fantastic, absolutely fantastic, that the school was closed and the people came out and the children, and absolutely quite rightly. I was the one on the planning committee who actually objected to it. And this is what I just wanted to say. Next May, there's the local council elections, the parish council and the district council elections. And it's the district councillors, I'm a district councillor as well as a county councillor, and it's the district council planning committee that gave permission for that mast. Although it doesn't actually really need permission, they still have to come and give a kind of approval from the local council that they've ticked all the right boxes, and indeed they didn't tick the right boxes, so there was plenty of reason to object to it. And but they didn't, they said that was fine. But as you know, it then got put up, and there was a bit of confusion about whether it was the 15-metre one that was being that had been appealed and withdrawn, and was all confusing. So usual distraction technique was going on. But anyway, it's there. I think absolutely fine. Yeah, why don't we just go and take it out? Absolutely. But I've written to the Secretary of State and asked him to intervene. That's the only option we have now, that he could intervene. There has been a suggestion that it could be relocated, because that mast in Dartington, as has been said, is probably the forerunner of potentially something much more sinister. Thank you, and well done.
Thanks very much, everyone, for coming. We're running out of time, so we stayed over late. Thank you all so much for coming tonight. Thanks for your patience in the beginning. Realise we are the midwives of the future, all of us. And thank you very much. Right, don't think we got time for questions. Thanks for everyone for coming. Thanks for Mark. Thanks for Dr. Graham Downing. Thanks Ian Crane. Thanks everybody. Thanks Brian Gerrish. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.